my walk, I realized that it's April 19th and that it's the 25th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing, an event that looms very large in my memory. I was 12 when it happened, and obviously it was the biggest news event of my lifetime up to that point that I remembered. Obviously, the Berlin Wall had fallen and the Soviet Union had collapsed, but I was quite a bit younger when that happened, and they didn't quite have the immediate shock of this. And obviously, the events of 9/11, 6 years later, a little over 6 years later, would obviously be, greatly supersede Oklahoma City in terms of their effect. Um, and so it was a big event in the time, bigger than Waco. And what's interesting is that it was also a big event in my political ideology. Um, One of the things that I heard recently made a lot of sense was that um, we didn't really have the internet back in 1995, and the narrative put out by the Clinton administration was that this was a horrible, horrible crime committed by, quote, the right wing. Now, Timothy McVeigh is not. I mean, he apparently was a neo-Nazi, and he wasn't in a militia. He wasn't a Republican. He didn't listen to talk radio. But Bill Clinton basically blamed talk radio and everyone to the right of Rush Limbaugh, including Rush Limbaugh, for this. The idea that anyone who criticized the Clintons or the Democrats were contributing to hate and anger, and that they were culpable for this. And it was devastating for the militia movement, which had been gaining ground for a long time. And it still colors the way people think about the militia movement. In fact, my home state of Michigan, just a few days ago, there was a large protest about the restrictions the governor has implemented because of COVID-19. And the protesters are out there with Gadsden flags, and many of them were open carrying firearms. And I saw several posts and memes on social media to the effect that these people, the fact that they had guns, the fact that they're right wing, meant that they were Nazis. The cartoons would show them with skinheads and swastika flags, which is, none of them had skinheads and none of them had swastika flags, but they were perceived as that way because that's been the narrative since Oklahoma City. But what was interesting is the Clintons slandered too many too deeply, and although they were largely aided and abetted by the mainstream media, which reported their propaganda as basically sincere and honest, many of these right-wing forces, whether they be on talk radio or the John Birch Society or the militias themselves, various authors, various think tanks, they didn't like being called neo-Nazis or you know, equated with being murderers, and so they kind of went out and did a lot to chip away at the quote-unquote official narrative of the Oklahoma City bombing. Now, there's a lot in the official narrative that is true, but there is so much that is omitted that it makes the narrative that most people remember and think of as basically being an unrealistic lie. But what this was important for me was that even though I didn't have the internet and I was not a red-pilled person, I certainly wasn't a libertarian at the age of 12, but I was exposed somehow or another through television, through talk radio, through conversation with people I knew, whether they be relatives or kids at school, that there was something very wrong with the quote-unquote official narrative. That what we were hearing on the news and what the president was saying and what many people believed was very obviously wrong. And for me personally, this was the genesis basically of a lot of my political thinking, this and Waco. A lot of this is tied together with Waco. The two events are, for whatever reason, inexplicably linked in most people's minds. And it really served as a political awakening for me in many senses. Now, initially, they didn't have political philosophy behind it other than, hey, the official government, the president, the Congress, the media can be, if not complete liars, at least highly deceptive in what they report. And so this was a really, really important event in me. It started me on the trajectory of learning history and learning government. That is the age, basically, when I started to analyze political philosophy more intently. I wasn't reading it so much, but just kind of thinking about, okay, the state is obviously good. I believed in the government. I believed that states were powerful and beneficent forces for good, but I also saw that they can be duplicitous, evil, and harmful, and so that any kind of question about the utility of a government needs to be weighed with its pros and its cons. Whereas before this point, I would have just assumed it was all positive. Let me just check to see if this is working. If you are getting this, by the way, go ahead and leave a comment so that I know that it's working. And I'm going to put a link here to Scott Horton is probably one of the best researchers that I've heard cover this topic. He covers mostly foreign affairs, but he's been covering Oklahoma City. He's done at least probably 20 or 25 interviews on it. And oh my gosh. Oh, here we go. Sorry. I'm going to put a link to, he just did an hour and a half discussion about it today on the Pete Quinones show, which I thought was a pretty good overview. They can't go into all the details, and this is just too short. But if you've never heard about the topic or you don't know anything about it, obviously feel free to ask here. I am not an expert, but I have read enough about it. I've read a couple books and certainly listened to plenty of podcasts. I'd be happy to, but this is a good introductions for people. So let's see. Hey, Stephen, I see you there. Happy Oklahoma City Day. I feel like most of my subscribers are young enough that they were either not alive or they were too young to, be aware that this was going on. So I feel like I need to bring it up because I do think this was actually a really important event, not just for me personally, but for the country. Also, 5 years ago, I did a video on the topic when I was working in Oklahoma City. I got the chance to work in Oklahoma City, actually in the city limits, and I had a subscriber there and his wife who was very nice. They were a very nice couple, and they took me out to dinner to a fantastic steak place that I was totally underdressed for. I wore shorts and a t-shirt, and it was like a white tablecloth kind of place, which I hadn't realized before I went. And then but before we went there, we actually went to the memorial to where it all went down years before. Now it's been, it's a memorial now. They closed the street that used to be there. So it's almost an unrecognizable location at this point compared to what it was like in 1995, even before the bombing, let alone in the immediate aftermath. So, so there's other things about this. There's obviously tons of conspiracy theories about it, many of which are ridiculous and many of which are not ridiculous. And then the other thing is there's this overriding sense of injustice that many of the people who got away with it got away with it. And whatever you want to say about the conspiracy theories, there is no question the prosecutor in the case against McVeigh has written a book, and he said that if he had polled everyone on his staff, all the lawyers and attorneys on the prosecution's team, if he had asked, do you think we got everybody involved, raise your hand, he said nobody would have raised their hand, i.e. that they all believed that there were many, many more people involved than Tim McVeigh and Terry Nichols, the two men who actually got charged with crimes. Now, that's astonishing when you think about it, because prior to 9/11, this was the biggest crime in U.S. history. I believe it's 168 people were killed, lots of children. By far the biggest domestic terrorist attack, if that's how you want to classify it, in U.S. history. Again, the only thing that's bigger is 9/11, and obviously 9/11 is an order of magnitude larger, but 9/11 hadn't happened yet. So this was far and away, and it was a big. I mean, when I was in high school and I was in band, we played songs that were written, musical compositions that were written as memorials to what happened. I think the one was called "A Light Unto the Darkness," and if you go look on YouTube, you can actually find a recording of my high school playing that somewhere. And so it was a big traumatic event. It saved Bill Clinton's presidency. Was the ATF involved in OKC too? Yes. So here's a couple things that are important to know about that. So the Murrah Federal Building is a federal building. So that doesn't mean that the federal government had built the building. Private contractors had built the Murrah Building, and had been built, I think, in the late 70s or the very early 80s. I'm pretty sure in the late 70s. But then the federal government rented out basically the entire building, and so um, all of the regional federal agencies were based there: the FBI, the ATF, whatever, post office, various other agencies. And then they had a daycare there for the people who worked there. And what ended up happening was, I think the bombing happened in the morning. It was after they opened, though. So most offices opened at 8, and I think the bombing happened at 9 something. And there are a couple things, but the most important thing is that nobody in the ATF was there that morning. Okay, so nobody in the ATF office, which I think normally would have had 20 or 30 people, none of them were there. None of them showed up for work that day, which is, well, we can make jokes about like government employees not showing up for work, but the daycare was there. The other agencies were there. There are reports of other people getting a tip off. There was a judge across the street. The name escapes me, but it was published in the paper, where he uh, he closed his office and actually went to Oregon, and he got interviewed by a local Oregon paper right after the event. And he goes, "I was told to not be there on April 19th, that April 19th was going to be a dangerous day." So the ATF was not there. They got heat for this in the immediate aftermath. People said, "Well, wait a second, how come you weren't there? All these other people died. If you knew, obviously you weren't there. You must have known something was going to happen. So why would you not alert others?" And one of the ATF agents said, "We were there and we were heroes." He said that, and then he made up a story that he was in the elevator, and the elevator, he got out of the elevator and he rescued somebody, and then he had to admit later he made the whole thing up. All right, so it didn't happen. He just made up a lie to sound good. Um, so the other thing is the ATF had a informant by the name of Carol Howe. So the way they do informants is Carol Howe was involved with all these neo-Nazis. She had a neo-Nazi boyfriend, and there were a whole bunch. There was this neo-Nazi enclave in Oklahoma in a place called Elohim City, and a whole bunch of neo-Nazis worked there, including Tim McVeigh, and they would live there and they would train and they would make bombs. And she got in trouble with the law, and she got turned state's witness, and so she was giving um, reports to the ATF. And the ATF at one point said that they're going to do a raid on Elohim City, and then the FBI told them, "No, you're not going to do a raid on Elohim City." They didn't say why, but we now know the guy who ran Elohim City was actually himself an FBI agent. And so the FBI didn't want the ATF to raid Elohim City because they had their own things going on there. Exactly what they were, we don't know. Um, but Carol Howe talked about, she knew that they were going to do a bombing. She actually cased out the Murrah building in December, so the bombing happens in April. She cased it out in the December before, and she took her ATF handler and said, "This is where they're going to blow up." So the ATF got prior warning. Did they necessarily know it was going to happen or not? Unclear, but they didn't show up to work that day. And so they clearly knew something was up. That doesn't mean that they did it, although they may have, but they obviously knew, and no one can take away the fact that none of them were there. So the ATF was definitely involved. Um, the most charitable reading, there is no charitable reading, because the fact that they were not there meant that they knew something was going to happen. They also showed up in their full battle gear immediately after, so it was almost as if they were waiting for it to happen. If that's true, and then they've just let all those people get murdered, then they're complicit in the murders. I mean, they're an accessory before the fact, literally. So if that's true, and it does seem like that is true, then they're just as guilty as McVeigh or anybody else. Now, did they make the bomb? We don't know. We can get into a whole discussion about the bomb. I don't have any direct evidence that they did. The most cynical thing would be that they completely did it themselves. The most charitable is that they allowed it to happen because they knew that they would gain popularity out of it, which they did. Uh, But so yes, the ATF was definitely involved, and so I'd recommend. There's so many books on this. Um, Others Unknown, which is by McVeigh's lawyer, is a good book, and then also uh, Oklahoma City: The Unfinished Story. I think it was published in 2011. Is pretty good. It covers all this, but again, all of this. Scott Horton has all this documented. A lot of this has come out in legal documents. All this stuff with Carol Howe and the ATF. This is not just Alex Jones did an interview and here it is. This is stuff that was affidavits in court, admitted by the ATF, unredacted material. So this is not like debatable stuff. This all happened. There are also interesting stories. The ATF or the FBI, I forget which one, their offices in DC got a phone call that morning saying something was going to happen. There's also a lot of evidence that neo-Nazis had foreknowledge. Now, here's another thing that people don't know, but the Murrah building had been targeted before. In 1981, a group of neo-Nazis tried to bomb it, didn't go through, and one of the leaders was a guy, something Snell. His last name was Snell, and he was actually charged with sedition, and he was executed on April 19th, 1995, the day of Oklahoma City. And he had told some of his friends that like his last wish in prison was to have the CNN brought in and turned on because he knew something big was going to happen. He wanted to watch it. So neo-Nazis were, and there are many more examples of this, and I can't remember them all. But neo-Nazis knew it was going to happen, and the ATF knew it was going to happen. So there's some level of communication between the two. That doesn't necessarily mean there was direction. You could say the ATF was directing them, and given how many people at Elohim City worked for the government, and that's the head of Elohim City. That's people like Andreas Strassmeyer, who appears to have been West German intelligence / also moonlighting for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Oh yeah, SPLC was doing this as well. And then Tim McVeigh himself. There's some compelling evidence that Tim McVeigh may himself have been a sheepdog, that he may have been working for intelligence services for the Army in particular. So we don't know that for sure, but I think that there's a good chance that's the case. So why exactly were the people at Waco, Ruby Ridge targeted? Seems really stupid to just kill random civilians for no reason. So in those two cases, I don't think that those plans started out with, we're going to go kill these people. Ruby Ridge, it was a case where they were trying to entrap someone. They went to Randy Weaver, and they wanted to, they got him on a small charge, like for having a sawed-off shotgun, something minor. And they said they wanted him to basically be an informant on other people, to entrap other people. And Randy Weaver said, go fuck yourself, I'm not going to do it. So they said, okay, fine, then we're going to go ahead and arrest you for the original crime. So they want to have it be a big sting. And what they made the mistake is Randy Weaver and his 14-year-old son were armed and dangerous. And so when they raided the Weaver residence, several people died, including Randy Weaver's son, the 14-year-old son, his wife, who was holding his infant daughter. So the daughter survived, and you can actually find interviews with Randy Weaver's daughter. And Weaver himself survived, but his wife was killed. She was shot by a sniper by the name of, what was his name? I want to say Francis Fukuyama, and that's not, because that's the guy who wrote that famous book. But it's a, what's his name? He's got a Japanese name, but he was a sniper for the ATF, and he shot both Randy Weaver's 14-year-old son and his wife. And then they charged Weaver with first-degree murder. He went to trial and he got acquitted. So Weaver, I mean, his wife got killed and his son got killed, so he didn't get away scot-free. But Weaver survived the federal prosecution. So as a result of that, the ATF looked really bad. They had botched the whole thing. There's blood on the ground, innocent blood, a woman, a boy, all for nothing really. And so they needed some good press. So Waco started as good press. And the idea there was they would accuse the Branch Davidians of violating gun laws. There's no evidence that they actually had. The Branch Davidians were very forthcoming. They knew that they were being investigated. They invited the ATF out on numerous occasions, said, hey, everything we're doing is legal. Come take a look, no problem. But they didn't want to have it be resolved in that way. They wanted there to be a raid. They wanted there to be a show. The code name for the operation was Operation Showtime. there's video of this event, and this is before the period of cell phones and digital cameras. The reason there's video is because the ATF called the local news agencies and said, hey, come out to Mount Carmel at this time, there's going to be a show, and so they go to Mount Carmel. And what they thought was going to happen is they do a raid, they'd arrest a whole bunch of people, they'd claim that they had all these guns, it would go to trial. Months later, years later, even if the trial came back acquitted, that they didn't do anything wrong, which they probably hadn't at that point, it would be too late. They already would have had the headlines and gotten the boost. But a shootout happened. 4 ATF agents died. At least 2 of them were for sure killed by other ATF agents by accident. In the video, the famous video, you can see an ATF agent actually shoot himself in the leg. The other 2 ATF agents might have also been killed by ATF agents. So it's possible the Davidians didn't kill anyone, although they definitely did shoot back in justified self-defense. I think 7 Davidians died, and then you had then there was this awkward situation where the Davidians wanted their day in court. Their house, I think, was going to be a huge piece of evidence that they had basically been assaulted from the air, from helicopters. That they said that the front door to the Davidians was a stainless steel door, and they said if you look at this door, it would be full of hundreds of rounds that had come from the outside going in. And when the whole place burned down, the ATF said that the door vaporized and there was no evidence. And the house was the biggest piece of evidence. So my guess is that, again, it was a photo shoot gone bad, and then they were willing to off and kill all the people there. They tried to kill them all. It seems like they failed to kill every single person. Everyone who tried to go out the back where there were no cameras trained. I mean, they told the news media that the Davidians had 50 caliber rifles, and so you couldn't be within 3 miles because the Davidians would kill you. And so all the video you have are from these news media outlets that are like 3 miles away using telescopic lenses, and so they can only see one side of the compound. When the fire happened, most of the Davidians fled out the back. We actually have the drone footage that the FBI used. If you look it up, the FLIR project, the guy who invented the FLIR, right? So the guy who patented the drone and the infrared camera that they used, he claims that by watching the footage that the ATF and FBI, would be the FBI at this point, are machine gunning. That will use automatic fire all the Davidians as they leave, and you can watch the video. Now it's infrared, so it's not gory details, but that appears to be what happens. The only ones who survived are the ones who climbed out on the roof in the front where there were video cameras. All of those people were charged with first-degree murder. They were all acquitted of first-degree murder, but then they were found guilty of violating the weapons charges, which the evidence there was very poor. The ATF had bubble wrap around burned rifles, so they just look like dark silhouettes, and they're covered in bubble wrap, and they said these have been modified to be fully automatic, which you cannot tell from that, and you just take our word for it. And so they were convicted on that charge, and then the judge said, yes, you were found not guilty of first degree murder and all these other charges, but you were found guilty of this charge, and so I'm going to sentence you as if the murder charge stuck. And so they all basically got life. Now, they didn't serve life, and now they are all out of prison at this point as of like a year or 2 ago. So again, it appears to be a photo op gone bad, and that they were willing, in order to save face and to not be embarrassed, to kill everyone there and then to lie about it. And the thing is, most people today, they saw what they saw on TV. They never read it. I mean, there's a good book called The Davidian Massacre. If you really want to learn about Waco, I highly recommend The Davidian Massacre. But also, if you don't want to read a book, The Rules of Engagement is a tremendous documentary that's about it. That I think it even won an Emmy, and you can watch that for free on YouTube. So I would highly recommend people watch that documentary and the FLIR Project. Look, type up the FLIR Project, watch that. Watch the Davidian, read the Davidian Massacre. I think that's by Carol Moore. I always get Carol Howe and Carol Moore mixed up, because but they shouldn't be associated. One's an informant for the ATF, and one wrote the Davidian Massacre. But I have friends, and like if you bring up Waco, they go, "Oh, well, they're just cultists who killed themselves." The cult part is fair. They didn't kill themselves, though. They were killed by the ATF and the FBI. Good evening. Hello, comrade. Sean Pierre, what's up? So I'm feeling a little weird today. I actually got hypnotized for 3 hours today, and it's not entirely worn off, so I'm still feeling a little wonky actually. Um, Everybody at the neo-Nazi compound was a federal agent. Yeah, this is the joke. The joke in militia circles is if you go to a militia meeting, half the people there will be ATF agents and half will be FBI agents. Uh, Tim McVeigh apparently tried to go to a Michigan militia meeting and they told him, get the fuck out of here. Not clear why. Either they thought he was racist, which he seems to have been, or they thought he was an informant, which he also seems like he might have been. Um, but yeah. Hello, Lengthyounarther. Been a long time. Yeah, 24 hours. Michael Rhinascutio made the bomb. I don't know who that is. Can't say. Randy Weaver was actually asked to saw off the shotgun by a federal agent. It was entrapment. Yeah, that sounds about right. Lon Horiuchi, there we go. Lon Horiuchi is the murderer, and he also was at Waco. He got redeployed to Waco after Ruby Ridge, and who knows how many people he killed there. And Tim McVeigh used to go around to gun shows handing out his name and address. Um, but it's interesting, if he thinks Lon Horiuchi is his murderer, why would he go and kill innocent people and not those that are guilty? And I believe Idaho charged Horiuchi with manslaughter and convicted him. And the feds have basically said he's untouchable. You can't do anything about him. So, like, that guy is definitely a cold-blooded killer. And the people at Waco were cold-blooded killers too. And if you want, I mean, I don't recommend this, but, well, maybe you should, just to know who you're dealing with here. But, like, after the fire burned, lots of those soldiers, and like Delta Force was deployed to Waco. They posed over the corpses of these children who burned to death, right? So these are skeletons. A lot of them died of cyanide poisoning because the tear gas that they used, when it's combusted, creates hydrogen cyanide gas, which kills you in the most horrible way. Basically, you have muscle contortions that are so strong that your muscles will break your own back. And so all these children, they died from that, and then then they were burned up in an inferno. And these fucking ATF agents and FBI agents and Delta Force guys went and posed, stood on these skeletons. You can see the pictures, like it was a trophy hunt in Africa. And they're congratulating themselves. And Lon Horiuchi was all part of that. Uh, Gun companies actually use Lon Horiuchi for advertisement as well. Do they use them in a good way or a bad way? Like he's on a target, or like, hey, it's accurate, like he said, this is a sad story. This is an incredibly sad story. It's very sobering when you realize that the government, like the nice democratic government, not the communists, not the Iranians, not the fascists, the Democrats, the Republicans, um, will kill you for the most callous reasons. And I've been listening to a lot of uh, uh, who's the dead atheist? Fuck. And he was kind of, oh, you're just a soft Democrat. You're not a tough guy. You're not man enough to be president. So he flew from New Hampshire back to Arkansas, where he was still governor, and had a lobotomized black man put to death. Just to show you I'm that tough. I'm not tough on, so like, and we already know Clinton. I mean, Clinton did the bombings in Khartoum and in Kabul, where he did drone missile strikes that we now know 100% he did to take the news media off of the coverage of the Monica Lewinsky scandal and the impeachment. So this is a guy who, just to change the headlines for one news cycle, will kill hundreds of people. And we also know that he'll kill hundreds of Americans. Now, it's not all Bill Clinton, because like the stuff with the Davidians, the ATF's raid on the Davidians started in the Bush administration. So that wasn't a program that Janet Reno and Bill Clinton started, but it's one they damn well finished. And it's absolutely chilling. I challenge anybody to watch Waco, the Rules of Engagement, and not feel their blood boil. Not just for the crime that was done, but the fact that there was absolutely no justice, and that there was an inversion of justice, that the villains were canonized as heroes. So I can't talk about this and not have a drink. To the dead. You believe in hypnosis. Hypnosis is real. It actually works. Not on everybody, but works on me. Well, the government is all of us, so if the government kills someone, they kill themselves. Yeah, I love this argument, Zero Pax. we're taxing ourselves. We're doing it to ourselves. It's not coercion because we do it to ourselves. And it's like, okay, so by that logic, the Holocaust never happened. That was just mass suicide. Holocaust was mass suicide. The Holodomor was mass suicide. The Holodomor was just an eating disorder that everybody had. It was a societal eating disorder, and the Branch Davidians, they could have moved to Somalia, so they were asking for it. Just looked it up. Did you say the FLIER, FLIER, FLIER project? Just first thing, look up the rules of engagement. And if you watch the rules of engagement, I think the FLIER project will probably come up as a related video. You might have to find it on Vimeo. It used to be on YouTube. They may have taken it down. And I also highly recommend the book, The Davidian Massacre, Davidian Massacre by Carol Moore, I want to say. Just looked it up. A paramedic, Tiffany Bible, said the ATF was on site 20 minutes later after the blast. Clean, tactical clear. Yeah. And none of them were in the building. I don't. And this is what bemuses me. This is when you show like so many people. They will just straight up deny that, even though there is no counter evidence. That's a positive claim that we can 100% back up, and there is no there is no contravening evidence at all. The only countervening evidence was the lie that an ATF agent was a hero, and then he retracted that later and said that that didn't actually happen. So what I don't understand the people. I mean, most people just don't do the research, so they're just not even aware. The thing is, a lot of this came out in the news that day. So the stuff that you're talking about there, it was in the news that day. The news media reported people that day. Another big thing about Oklahoma City is that Tim McVeigh was definitely involved and guilty as hell. The problem is that he was not acting alone. There were 24 witnesses who saw Tim McVeigh that morning with the Ryder truck. Wow, slam dunk. Except every one of those witnesses saw him with somebody else. Now, Terry Nichols was in Kansas. Terry Nichols definitely wasn't there that morning. So who is the other person? And the FBI, I think it was a day or 2 days after Oklahoma City said, we know it was a bomb, we know it was a Ryder truck, we know it was Timothy McVeigh, and we know he was with somebody else. John Doe number 2, that was the term. And so the biggest manhunt in United States history was to find, quote unquote, John Doe number 2. And then every one of their witnesses that they found, they had this great case against McVeigh, but every one of those witnesses said he was also with this other person. Well, Tim McVeigh's lawyers were like, we're going to find that other person and say, it wasn't our guy, it was that guy. Tim McVeigh is just that guy's buddy, and that guy's the one who really did it, right? Now, that's not a great argument, but that is reasonable doubt. At least you could make that case that it's reasonable doubt. At the trial, the prosecution didn't call any of those witnesses because every one of them would have fingered somebody else in addition to McVeigh. But this was all in the news. If you paid attention to the news, John Doe number 2 was on everyone. It was like Osama bin Laden of the time. And so now, if I say this now, people who don't remember it or whatever will think this is all a conspiracy theory. You heard this on Alex Jones. Like, no, this was on CNN. This was on Inside Edition. This was on ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, NewsHour, everything. FBI press conferences, John Doe number 2. And so the title of the book by McVeigh's lawyers is called Others Unknown, because others unknown definitely were involved. And now we know the prosecutors themselves knew that other people were involved. Now they claim that they did not want to bring other people involved because then there was a chance, not that McVeigh would be acquitted because the evidence against McVeigh was too good, but that he wouldn't get the death penalty because his lawyers could say, well, he was just a foot soldier, he didn't really know what was going on. So, but just imagine how that sounds. This is the worst homicide, the worst mass murder in American history, and you're not going to find the people responsible just so you can get one of the guys responsible the death penalty. And so the head prosecutor admitted that not only he, but all the prosecutors were certain that they did not have all the people involved. So that's their version of why. That might be true. The more plausible answer is the reason they didn't go after everybody else is because some of those people were informants, and we just start coming up to the problem that they had foreknowledge, and that would be embarrassing. That would be embarrassing. And so they didn't want to go there. And so we never got to find out. Lon was used as the mascot. That's kind of disgusting, actually. Christopher Hitchens. Yeah, Christopher Hitchens. Okay, let me find the Fleer project. All right. Du-du-du. Fleer project. I don't see it. Let's see. Waco rules of engagement. So you can definitely okay. So Waco rules for engagement. It looks like you have to rent it on YouTube, but I would recommend renting it and watching it. And yeah, I would just. I mean, that's more in depth in the Fleer project, but I'm sure you can find it if you're out if you look out there. Sorry. But Christopher Hitchens, yeah. Christopher Hitchens hates the Clintons, and it's because he knows that they will murder people just for very sinister political reasons. He's right about the Clintons. Yeah, he absolutely hates the Clintons. Hillary and Bill both. He wrote a book about it. Nobody Left to Lie to in 1999. He's interviewed all the people that he's raped, and he's like, he definitely raped them. He interviewed them all independently. They all tell you the same stuff. For those who want the gory details, Bill Clinton likes to bite the lower lip of women, and his face turns really red when he has sex. Just so you know. Has the ATF been doing anything other evils lately? They seem to have calmed down. Well, they got a lot of bad press because of all this, but they still do bad stuff. They it was a couple years ago now, but there was this booming industry where people would buy replica guns. So these would be pellet guns. They weren't actual guns, but they shot plastic pellets, but they looked like AR-15s or AK-47s or whatever. And they were made in Taiwan. They'd be shipped to the United States. And at one point, the ATF just confiscated the entire load and said these can be converted to real guns, which is bullshit. They can't be. And there's the guy who's doing it is like holding it wrong, and he's like, if you put a they shoot plastic pellets. If you put an actual round of ammunition, it won't even chamber, and it definitely won't fire. And so there's that. They also added, it's now not the ATF, it's the BATFE, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. They tried to ban bump stocks after the Las Vegas shooting, where they just, again, no legislation was passed, but by fiat, they just said these are banned now. They just reclassified them. They used their discretionary powers to reclassify them. So they still are a very bad organization, and they still do bad stuff. Um, let's see. But yeah, have they killed 70 children in like, or not 70 children, 70 people of color in a church? No, they haven't done that in a couple years. My favorite things the Clintons did was bomb a medicine factory in Sudan and say it was Al Qaeda, knowing that there was, yeah, it was an aspirin factory in Khartoum, and they did it just to get the press off of the impeachment trials, even though he was clearly committed perjury. Yeah, Nobody Left to Lie to. Good book. My high school girlfriend's family was very involved with the Clintons. They were psycho. Your girlfriend's family or the Clintons? Was 9/11 an inside job? I used to be really into that and follow that so intently in every documentary. And to be honest, there are a lot of things about it that are very strange. Like the Building 7 is obviously the biggest one. John O'Neill dying. So John O'Neill was the head of the FBI's Bin Laden unit for a long time. And he basically quit in disgust, and he took a new job as the head of security at the World Trade Center. And his first day on the job was 9/11, and of course he died, which is just such a crazy coincidence. You have the whole thing that all the hijackers had passports. And so I don't know. This could be a case of, I really don't know. Like the stuff about bombs in the buildings, yeah, that seems less plausible to me, except for Building 7 was clearly, it looks so obvious that it was controlled demolition. You can't look at it and not think that it looks that way. There's also been some new research that said that the NIST claims that their boiler exploded in the basement, and that's why it happened, and even though that's never happened in any other building ever. And apparently there's been some new empirical research to show that's just not possible. So my point with 9/11 though is that the official story is bad enough. You know, they tax us $1 trillion a year. They justify their rule over up in the with the notion that they're going to protect us, especially from an assault. And the day that it happens, they completely drop the ball and they completely fail in every way. The only defense that did happen, and this is the official story, are the passengers on Flight 93 who fought back. That's it. Now, there's actually conspiracy theories that Flight 93 was shot down, but that's not what the government says. The government says that the people on the plane, fought back and took out the hijackers and whatever. So at the end of the day, $1 trillion got us nothing except for the bravery of the people on that plane, and that's it. And what's so fucked up about the whole ideology of the state is they can completely fail, and nobody got fired, nobody got a pay cut, they got more money, more power, and more popularity. And that is so sick on every level. Even if they were innocent of it being an inside job, it's so disgusting. And the way that they cynically used it, and there is no question that they cynically used it to go after Iraq, to go after the Taliban, right? They didn't just go after Al Qaeda. They went after the Taliban. Read A Fool's Errand About the War in Afghanistan by Scott Horton. And he lays it out as well as you can without being able to read Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney's mind, that they didn't really care about Al Qaeda. In fact, they would be happy if Al Qaeda got away so they could use them as a boogeyman to chase forever. And that this was all going to be part of a Zbigniew Brzezinski-esque grand chessboard to get us to have, military presence in Central Asia, which they really wanted for geopolitical reasons, but not for national security reasons. All right. Shit. These topics are depressing me. I'm sorry, Luke. It has to be said. I can't not say anything on a day like today. Found the ad for HS Precision's use. What? That is revolting. I'm glad I can't see the link. How many people died because Clinton bombed the medicine factory in Sudan? It was more than 9/11, I believe. No, I don't think that's correct, Jared. I think it was like 100. I heard 99, 100, something like that, which is bad enough. It doesn't need to be more than that to be a crime. He also bombed Kabul at the same time. We don't know how many people died in Kabul. Yes, Alex, I'll take things I never wanted to know about Bill Clinton for 200. He also would tell them, like he would like come inside them. He would breed them, but then he would say, "Don't worry, I'm sterile because I had polio." So there you go. And he's the attorney general, he's the governor. Assault pellet guns. Yeah, you can find the video of the ATF agent talking about that, and he's like putting in the magazine wrong, and yeah. They don't even consider non-voters people. They don't even consider voters people. They'll kill voters. They'll kill voters. You don't think you don't think Randy Weaver could vote. You don't think David Koresh could vote. You don't think that the people in the Murrah Federal Building could vote. Yeah, they could vote, and they didn't lift a finger to save them, even though they clearly knew something was going to happen. They knew enough not to go themselves. It's like these guys, and we see this today, with all these senators who knew that there was going to be a pandemic. They go and they sell their stocks and they buy their stocks, but they don't tell us. They don't say, "Hey, everyone, you should know there's this horrible thing about to happen." We can die. They don't give a fuck. That's their attitude. They rule us, and that is their attitude. We are their chattel to them. yes, they pander, and there's this democratic rhetoric where there are servants. That's how they talk. But at the end of the day, they're in power. We're not. Not just the politicians, the bureaucrats too, especially the higher level ones and the ones who have badges and guns. And they have the moral authority of this entire ideology of statism and of democracy that just wraps whatever they do in some kind of aura of unimpeachable legitimacy that allows them to commit hardcore murder and walk away, pat themselves on the back, and say, I'm a hero. And if you doubt me, then you're a villain. Uh, I was quite close to the Twin Towers on 9/11. I remember it like it was yesterday. Oh, so you are on Manhattan? What do you think of Alex Jones? I think Alex Jones is very, very entertaining. I mostly agree with his politics, not entirely. Obviously, I'm an anarchist and he's not. He is very strongly libertarian, though, I think, and I think he's mostly over the target. Now, he's also an entertainer, and he's said in court proceedings that what he does is an act. Now, I don't know how much of that is to protect himself from, hey, you're crazy, so you're going to lose custody of your child, which, by the way, his son is super hot. If you ever see, you can find pictures of Rex Jones like on the internet, and he's ripped as fuck. But he claims it's an act. So how sincere is the guy really? And there's been reports that he's a little bit of a shyster. People argue about income, and I've also noticed, he'll have people on and they'll make a call to action, and it's very clear. Even he's all talk. He won't actually do anything. So like, I don't venerate the guy, but I was a paid member of Prison Planet for 3 or 4 years when I was in college. And I will give them to their credit. When I called and said, hey, I'm out of money, I can't really afford this anymore, they were very good about canceling the membership. So, you know, he's definitely, it's better news than you get on CNN. So even though it's clear that he fearmongers and he makes a lot of stuff up and he gives himself little, you know, this is what the elites think. So it doesn't matter if it's true or not because he can always allege that's what they think. If you watch his interview with Joe Rogan, he's very careful to couch the language in that way. So all the stuff about interdimensional aliens and all that, he couches that as that's what the elites believe. So he doesn't have to prove that it's true or not because he can just say that's what the elites believe. Larry, lucky Larry, pull it. Yeah, I mean, again, I've seen those videos. He says I told him to pull it. What does that even mean? That means you're going to demolish it. It doesn't have any other meaning. That's the most likely meaning. Uh, I was actually in a communal shower on 9/11 at the New York Sports Club. I walked out and somebody walked in covered in soot saying the Twin Towers had just collapsed. You're fucking kidding me about that. Okay, how old were you at the time? Okay, this is peak level. I was actually getting circumcised on 9/11. Mid-operation, a nurse burst in covered in soot and told the doctor the towers had collapsed. True story. Oh, come on. Luke, I'm sorry. We need to talk about this. I was up when I was a kid when I thought about all this stuff, and I remember staying up at night, not being able to sleep, being upset about the whole thing, and I couldn't. There were nights when I was 12 and 13 years old where I couldn't sleep because I was sure David Rockefeller was going to come and kill me in the night, or the Rothschilds or whoever. So I mean, but you really have to confront it and make peace with what you know and what you don't know. Oh, died because they didn't get the malaria drugs the factory produced and other medicines. So yeah, I'd actually heard that they made aspirin there. I hadn't heard that it was a malaria factory. Uh, so I don't know if that's true. If that's true, though, so much the worse. I love that you doubled down on the Bill Clinton stuff. I don't drink coffee. Are you talking about the sex stuff? Bill Clinton is a totally sex fiend, and he knows it. Also, there's interesting if you guys go and watch because I've been on this Christopher Hitchens thing for a while. And thank you, Jared, for that. I was talking to Jared, and he brought up Christopher Hitchens, and I've been watching a lot of Christopher Hitchens videos. Uh, Christopher Hitchens was on Bill Maher in 1999, and they talked about the rape cases. And it's amazing how Bill Maher is like, You weren't there. There's no evidence. There, this is 20 years old. Why are they just bringing it up now? There's no credibility. He's a honorable man. You weren't there. How do you know? And the fact that that was his attitude with Bill Clinton, but then for Kavanaugh or Trump or any Republican, their attitude is you're absolutely guilty based on the flimsiest evidence. You don't need to have any evidence. Any accusation is true. Burden of proof falls on you, and there's actually no way to prove it wrong because it's spectral evidence. So, yeah. I stand corrected. They will kill voters. Good point. They absolutely will kill voters. They absolutely do not give a shit. Right? I mean, when voters look at all these events, they became more popular. Waco made them more popular. Oklahoma City, Bill Clinton admits that Oklahoma City saved his presidency. It gave him a chance to be, quote, the hero. What the fuck did he do? I mean, even the official story, he did nothing. And yet he's the hero. And like he was glib about it. Like if you read the interviews, he's on Air Force One talking to the press after he just won like his reelection campaign in '96 or whatever, and he kind of kicks his legs back and he's like, Oklahoma City really helped me, made me the hero, it took all the heat off of all my failures, and now I'm the hero, and I shed a tear. I shed a he fucking sheds a tear about a kid dying. What about the kids you burned to death in Waco? What about those kids that you drove over their bodies with a tank? Jano Reno called those Bradley fighting vehicles like a rent-a-car. And you accuse them of beating babies. We heard the Davidians were beating babies, so we killed them all. We killed them all. And then he has a tear. A tear. It's the same with fucking Obama when he talks about Newtown. He's like, oh, how many babies have you incinerated with Hellfire missiles in Pakistan and Afghanistan and Libya and Somalia and Yemen and Syria and Iraq? The gall of these people and the culpability, the cupidity of citizens who don't see that and are willing to go along with it. They won't believe anything unless they're told to believe it by the people who are victimizing them the most. It's like mass Stockholm syndrome. And I do not drink coffee. I think David Icke and Alex Jones are surprisingly insightful. Yeah, they're definitely over the target. Jones more than Icke, in my opinion. I think Icke is a little out there too much. But you got to give him credit for just being successful at being a wacko. Alex Jones was ripped when he was young. Well, look at Rex Jones now. He's ripped now. I think Alex has been too successful to stay ripped. He's kind of blubbery at this point. Q claims that Alex Jones is an agent of Mossad. Well, everyone's an agent of Mossad. I know Ryan Dawson thinks that he's way too soft on Zionism and Israel. And I've heard him criticize Israel, but I mean, you have to be, to get credibility in the anti-Israeli lobby, you got to go pretty far, and I don't know if he goes far enough. I remember theories of Jones being a Jesuit. Well, there's a lot of theories that he's Bill Hicks. There's a lot of theories that Bill Hicks faked his death and became Alex Jones. Right. I was 17 on 9/11. So what were you doing in a communal shower? Just working out? No wonder we get along so well. You were 17 on 9/11. I was 18. Wait. I was 18 on 9/11, so... Or was I 19? 2017? Yeah, I was 18 on 9/11. You should watch Peter Hitchens. I just heard that he's a religious right-wing version of his brother. I've been trying to quit coffee, caffeine for literally years. Well, that's why I never started drinking. Or smoking. I don't have to quit because I never started. I bring up Clinton all the time when people talk about Kavanaugh. So much more evidence on Clinton. So much more serious allegations. Yeah, you know what? And what Hitchens will point out is that, when these women have accused Clinton of rape, he's never actually denied it. He just says, talk to my lawyer. Talk about a Jewish answer. He won't even deny it. Or at least he wasn't. He hadn't when he was president. Maybe he has since then. But like, he would just, I won't say anything except through my lawyer. That was his answer to that. How would you like to have seen an Oliver Stone JFK style movie on OKC? That's a great idea, Cinnamon Fan. That would be an amazing movie. Because I think Oklahoma City is way juicier than the JFK assassination. I read Part of God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens. Made me really hate the new atheist ideology. Yeah, there's something about them that I don't like, but Bill Clinton was a masterful politician. No question about it. Bill Clinton is probably the best politician that we've had in like 100 years. I think that he is top. I mean, people like Obama don't compare to Bill Clinton. He's just next level. And what's weird is that it just did not rub off on Hillary. Hillary just does not have the skill or the charm. She's too much of a bitch. And Clinton is a piece of shit. Clinton is a murderer. Clinton has the blood of so many children, and it's Iraqi children, it's Afghanistan children, it's Sudanese children, it's American children. He's a rapist. He's corrupt. He's a liar. He's petty. He has no principle. Like, and yet he's likable. So, and when I hear him talk, I've never heard him in person, but you can see where he does sit down that he can read you very, very well, and he knows what angle to pull with you. And he knows, if you really hate him, he knows how to come across to a liberal. He knows how to come across to a conservative. And you just have to keep reminding yourself, that man is a murderer who will kill you or anybody else. Look at the shit that he did when he was governor, the Mena, Arkansas stuff, where people were getting their heads chopped off, and then and the coroner would say they died of an ulcer. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. Like, they found people with their heads cut off, and the coroner would say they died of an ulcer and their poodle ate their head. And then Bill Clinton would defend them and be like, oh, he's just overworked. He's a good guy. And if you ever watch that Tom Cruise movie about Barry Seal, where the CIA is flying drugs into Nicaragua, or flying guns into Nicaragua to fly drugs back to Mena, Arkansas. And when Barry Seal gets captured, and they're going to indict him, and then the phone rings, and it's the governor. This is all true. This wasn't Hollywood. Guess who the governor is? That's Bill Clinton. Who will murder? He will murder a retarded black man to look tough, and yet he's an authentic black person. I've never seen Trump cry. Is the one thing I can respect about him. How different do you think it would be if Ross Perot had been elected in 20? That's a good question. It would be very. Who knows? He probably would have died. Peter Hitchens is greater than Christopher Hitchens. Well, I'll have to check out Peter Hitchens because I've never watched anything. It's funny how Christopher Hitchens ended up an atheist pro-war socialist and Peter Hitchens ended up an anti-war social conservative. Yeah, Christopher Hitchens identified as a socialist for a long time, and he loves Marx, and he loves Trotsky, and yet he ended up supporting the Iraq War. He sounds like he's pro-life. Today he sounds like he considers abortion murder. He still might favor allowing it, but he considers it murder. So he's definitely had a lot of ideological growth. Not all of it good, right? If you're going to become a pro. He basically is us versus them when it comes to the Arabs, the Arabs, which it does seem like he lumps them all together, whether it be Saddam, Iran, or Al-Qaeda. I know he knows better. Like, I know he knows the distinctions. He's been to all those places. He's reported there. He knows the difference between a Shiite and a Sunni, and yet he does see, it seems like in his mind, there's a clash of civilizations between us and, quote, Islam, as a monolith. At least that's the impression I got when he talks about the Iraq War. Clinton killed 500,000 Iraqi children in the Medal Albright. His Secretary of State said it was worth it. Yeah. So we can even quibble about the numbers here because there are different estimates. But the official policy was that's how many died, and it was worth it. And they didn't get anything out of it. So how it was worth it is a good question. Um, but yes, a 500,000 Iraqi children was worth what? Billions of taxpayer dollars being wasted. What was the name of the conservative dude who would post videos on abortions on public access TV? You used to talk about him, can't find him. So his name was John, I believe John Mongopoulos. Mongan. Oh fuck. Let me see. Sorry guys, let me find this guy real quick. John Mongopoulos. Why is this not working? Shit. Home. No. So one thing that's interesting, John had this public access television show in Lansing, Michigan for like, I think he might still, but at least 15, 20 years, and obviously has thousands of hours of video, but he has almost no presence on YouTube. John Mangapoulos. Uh, he did have videos up though. John Mangap. Shit. All right, let me see if he's got them under Kyle Bristow. Let's see, Kyle Bristow. Okay. Let's see. So when I was in college, I was friends with a guy who was the head of the Young Americans for Freedom, not Young Americans for Liberty, the William F. Buckley Young Americans for Freedom at Michigan State. It was head by a guy named Kyle Bristow, who was on the SPLC's like hate list for a long time, who is apparently Richard Spencer's lawyer now. He went to law school. But he uploaded a lot of videos of Mongopoulos at one point. Let me see if I can find. Here we go. Okay. Am I allowed to post these in? Yeah, here we go. John Mongopoulos debates a homosexual. John Mongopoulos. Okay. These are not the best videos of him, though. Can I post a link? Will that work? There's videos of him debating Debbie Stabenow, who is now the senator from Michigan, the senior senator. He ran against her for Congress way back in the day. So let me see if this will work. All right, I'm going to put this link in the description, or in the. Here we go. Sign into the chat. I'm the chat man. What the fuck? Shit. Okay. Let me go to the. Sorry, guys, while I'm trying to figure this out. Here we go. Okay, I'm posting it. Posting the link. So there's a link to a Mongopoulos video. Let me know if that works. There we go. And also just, I would screenshot his name and then just do a search on his name. Okay. Sorry, way back in the comments now. Sorry. Holy cow. Holy cow. Peter Hitchens sounds pretty libertarian. He's no libertarian. He's quite interesting, blah, blah, blah. it's odd how Alex Jones is so anti-vax. It never discusses circumcision. I have heard I have heard Jones talk about circumcision once or twice, but not with very much vehemence, and I feel like he just kind of says it's a religious choice or whatever. Um, so, and if he did have a take on it, it would be kind of a weird take, would be my guess. Since you've mentioned the Alex Jones is Bill Hicks theory, have you ever heard of the Mark Dice is River Phoenix and Adam Kokesh is Jonathan Brandeis? I don't know who thought Jonathan Brandeis is. I've also never heard that Mark Dice is River Phoenix. Now, it is interesting, though, because Mark Dice did go by the name John Connor for a long time. And he was kind of anal about protecting his identity. He wouldn't go on camera for many, many years when he was identified as John Connor. I've never heard that theory, and I'm sure it's ridiculous. After the planes hit the first building, I decided to go to the gym, obviously. You sound like you're more addicted to communal showers than I am. I knew they were on fire via CNN plane at the gym. Then I went into the showers to get away from the news. Yes, communal showers are relaxing in that way. You should definitely join the communal shower subreddit. But a couple after the video I made on that, a couple of the subscribers went and posted, made some good posts on there. So I invite you all to get involved in my passion project there. And that continues to be interesting. I got another message today from somebody who was like, "Thank you for studying this. I really care about this. I want to know." Blah blah blah. Okay, post about it, people. Um, the gym was near the pedestrian off ramp off Brooklyn Bridge. Okay, I've been there. I walked there one night with a really hot Australian dude during Pride. Um, this cat ran all the way from the towers to Brooklyn Heights from the blast dust cloud. Wow. Yeah, the thing about that gets me about Oklahoma City is that multiple eyewitnesses said they saw McVeigh with John Doe too, and yet the government still denies John Doe 2 exists. Yeah, multiple. 24 witnesses. 24 witnesses, I think just from that day, saw McVeigh with the Ryder truck with John Doe number 2. And all of them identify with somebody else, that he was with somebody else. And then, so there was this massive manhunt. And then by the time of the trial, they go, oh, there is no John Doe number 2, which they are basically saying that all of their witnesses, all of their circumstantial evidence that puts McVeigh there are delusional, right? They imagined it. That's why they didn't bring them up on the stand. So like they are almost willing. They were really willing to risk an acquittal for Tim McVeigh to not find John Doe number 2. That's what it means. That they were so interested in not finding out who John Doe number 2 was that they were willing to risk McVeigh getting off, which I think he could have gotten off. And if you listen to the trial, one of the jurors, said, "Well, I kept waiting for McVeigh to find an alibi, as if the burden of proof was on him to, prove that he was innocent," which of course is the inverse of the facts. And then the other thing was that, what was I going to say? So instead of interviewing all these witnesses who could place McVeigh in the Ryder truck, which is what you think they would do, instead what they do is they call witnesses like a little girl whose mommy died, and she'd be like, who didn't see McVeigh or see the truck or wasn't even there that day, and they'd be like, "Are you sad that your mommy's dead?" And she's like, "Yeah, I am." And they're like, "See, this is a horrible crime." And so they just basically had 100 witnesses come and talk about how sad they were, and whoever did this is a horrible man. And look at this grumpy looking skinhead over here. Isn't he a meanie? And so the jurors were like, okay. Now, apparently, Terry Nichols almost got off, too. That's another thing. Uh, bu- 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 When some people propose more outlandish conspiracy theories, it detracts from the apparent credibility of people who point out corruption surely are the former planted by the elites. So I think mostly it's just people who are, looking for counter narratives and see conspiracies everywhere. And I think a lot of it's free thinking. And honestly, I think we should tolerate that, right? So with Oklahoma City, there were a lot of people who thought that there were bombs in the building. And actually, there were bombs in the building in the sense that the ATF had a whole bunch of bombs that they were illegally holding there. And as the rescue was going on, at least 4 times, they evacuated the place because they found bombs. They had a tow missile. The ATF had a tow missile in their offices, above the daycare, that they had involved in a case in some sense. And when that got uncovered, they were like, oh, everyone has to leave, and then they would take that evidence away. And in the meantime, people who were getting rescued died, and there were firefighters who, they would say like they have somebody there who's begging to be helped, and they're digging them out of the rubble, and then the ATF is like, everyone's got to go. There's a bomb threat, and so then they leave, and then an hour later, when they come back, they're dead. And so they absolutely, more people were dying as they were covering up evidence, because the thing is, they weren't supposed to have bombs in their building. But then there was this whole thing by an Air Force colonel named Colonel Parton, and Colonel Parton had come out and done a video where he said, there were bombs in the building. Now, I don't think that was wrong. I think that it was wrong, and that he made a lot of mistakes in there. But I think it's fine for people to question. So I do not mind. Alex Jones wants to say the crisis actors or whatever. You should be free to say all those things. Is there planted opposition? I think that there is sometimes, but I cannot tell which is which usually. And so I just say, hey, it's a possibility. Don't believe everything you hear. Be aware that this is a technique that they use, but it's not necessarily always what's going on. And you just have to keep an open mind and a critical eye as well, a discerning eye. Primary Colors is with John Travolta as Bill Clinton is an excellent film about the Clintons, although quite over the top. So the thing I don't like about Primary Colors is that the character, I forget who it is, but she's the crazy lady who is she's the main person who runs the campaign, and she becomes very aware of, like, she loves the Clintons, and she's devoted to them, but she knows that they are very corrupt, and so she commits suicide. And the problem is, I don't think any of the Clintons' acolytes are like that. I think that the Clinton acolytes are either completely bewitched by them. I think that they're so charming and so powerful, and that's so much of a draw to people. And there's all the status that's associated with becoming, in the orbit of a president like that. That I think a lot of people are completely self-deceived, and they just do not see the flaws. And Hitchens talks about this a lot, because he gets asked, like, well, the people in the Clinton administration, they're like smart people, are they? But they act like they're in a cult. That they don't believe he's a rapist, that they don't believe that he's a liar, that they think that that's a big conspiracy against him. And he did say that they're all very smart, but that they pretty much are all in a Clinton cult. The one exception he gave was actually George Stephanopoulos. He said he thinks Stephanopoulos kind of maintained some objectivity through that. I don't know what the basis. I think Stephanopoulos is a piece of shit, but he might not be a Clinton cultist. So the thing is, I don't think that their adherents, I think they're too self-delusional, or too much they've bought into the power too much. They don't really care. Even if they recognize the corruption, it wouldn't bother them. They're just sheer power politics, and they don't give a shit if they kill innocent people. Like that, to them, that is a completely pragmatic decision to be had. That is completely moral. Like, they're the government; they can't do anything that's morally wrong. Would you say that Bill Clinton is the Ted Bundy of American presidents? Yeah, I don't know if it's a perfect analogy, but it's certainly fair. He's definitely killed. I mean, he's killed way more people than Ted Bundy, though. So. Peter Hitchens was also a Trotskyite for a long time and then converted. Yeah, the video I watched today, he got into a big debate about a Trotskyite and a Trotskyist, and wanting to make the distinction between the two. And he's apparently a big supporter of Trotsky. Was very involved in his writings. Bill Clinton is just arrogant and idiotic enough to come out and say House of Cards is 99% accurate, House of Cards, that show based on Bill Clinton. Yeah, where he's a murderer. Where he's a murderer and a rapist. There's some things that are in your face where it's like, this is a double, like, they know what's going on and they want to rub your face in it. And it's kind of like, thanks for looking up John Margopoulos for me. Yeah. I don't know why there's very few videos of John Margopoulos out there, which astounds me considering that there are hundreds of hours of videos of him. He never made the jump to YouTube as far as I can tell. And somebody, one of my subscribers, sent me a link, and he's apparently a Trump supporter now, which I never, ever would have guessed, because he was staunchly, I mean, Mongopoulos is the one who first alerted me to Ron Paul. He basically said, everyone in Congress is evil. Like, everyone in Congress violates the Constitution. Everyone in Congress is a liberal. Everyone in the Congress is a godless communist, except there's one honorable man who follows the Constitution, and his name is Ron Paul. So that was the very first time I ever heard of Ron Paul. And I thought, man, if there's somebody who meets this guy's standards, he must be fucking phenomenal, because this guy had such a high bar when it came to, political philosophy. But he's first and foremost, he was a Christian, and he was a fundamentalist Christian. And he did have very strong minarchist political beliefs and constitutional political beliefs, but he was first and foremost a Christian. And so I'm somewhat surprised that he became so outspokenly Trump. But there's pictures of him campaigning for Trump with Kyle Bristow, of all people. So I've met them both, and he's really. I became an anarchist by following people. Mongopoulos is not an anarchist, but he recommended. He was a big fan of Joseph Sobrin, and so I started looking up Sobrin, and Sobrin had been interviewed by none other than Scott Horton, the guy who's done a ton of interviews on Oklahoma City. And so it was by listening to Horton interview Sobrin, and then also Mongopoulos told me that Sobrin became an anarchist because he had read a book called Democracy, the God That Failed by some German guy who he couldn't remember. And I listened to the interview with Sobrin on Scott Horton, which at the time he called it the Philip Drew interview show. And during that interview, Sobrin talked about having read Democracy, the God That Failed by Hans Hermann Hoppe. And so Horton had also interviewed Hans Hermann Hoppe. So I listened to his interview entitled The Myth of National Defense. And that was the video that convinced me of anarcho-capitalism. At that point, I had become enough of a minarchist that I thought the only reason we needed a state was for self-defense. And I wasn't totally sold on that. And it was listening to that interview. So Mongopoulos is very important in my political philosophy, even though he would hate me as a godless homosexual who eats feces and is bound for hell. But I still owe him a huge debt of gratitude. Also, given the number of sons that he has, probably more than one of them is gay. Would just be my guess. Did you see the Joe Rogan interview with the MK Ultra guy? Seems like the feds have been setting up neo-Nazi stuff for ages. No, I didn't. What's the name of that guy? And also, can you put it in the? I can't retrieve comments of this once it's up. So can you wait until the video's uploaded and post it then? Can't see it otherwise. Yeah. Well, one of the things that came out of Oklahoma City is the feds were one of the people they thought might be John Doe number 2 was a guy named Richard Lee Guthrie. And so Richard Lee Guthrie was a guy who was a Nazi, and he had been a bank robber, and he had a red mullet and a dragon tattoo, and he'd been to Mexico. So the feds were looking for John Doe number 2, and guess what? They found a guy with a red mullet with a dragon tattoo who was a neo-Nazi who'd been to Mexico. And so they took this guy and they arrested him. They put him into custody, and it turns out he wasn't Richard Lee Guthrie. He was actually a guy named Jesse Trentadue. And Jesse Trentadue was a hardcore criminal guy. And he died in federal custody. And so they write a letter to Jesse Trentadue's family, or I'm sorry, Kenneth Trentadue's family. I'm getting the names mixed up. I think Jesse Trenadue's the one who died. So they send a letter to his family, and they're like, hey, your next of kin died. We're going to have him cremated. So sorry. Unfortunately for them, his brother was a lawyer, Kenneth Trentadue. So Kenneth Trentadue is this lawyer in Utah, and he goes, wait. My brother is in federal custody, which we didn't know, and he's dead. And you're going to cremate the body? No, you're not. And he, does the letter. He had all the legal skills. They get the body. He'd been beaten to hell. He'd been just had the shit beat out of him. And what we think, and he was like, what the fuck? He gets arrested. We didn't know he got arrested. And he gets beaten to death. And then they claimed he committed suicide. They said that he hung himself after he beat the crap out of himself. So, he starts doing all the legal paperwork. And he actually gets a call from Tim McVeigh a couple months later. And he's like, hey, your brother was killed because the feds thought that he was Richard Lee Guthrie, when actually he's just a guy who matches the description of Richard Lee Guthrie. And he's like, what the fuck? Why? I don't believe this. And then a couple months later, J.D. Cash, who was a reporter for a paper called the McCurtain County Gazette, who was a guy who was following Oklahoma City very intently, and he had a family connection himself. He had a firefighter involved who said, we got a warning this was going to happen. So he was kind of interested in the story. He calls up Jesse trying to do as well and says, hey, your brother Kenneth was murdered by the feds. The feds thought that he was a different guy. They're trying to get him to confess. So they're beating the crap out of him. They're torturing him to get him to confess to somebody who he wasn't, and they killed him in the process. And they were going to cover up the evidence, but you're a lawyer and they're able to protect. So this is still ongoing, by the way. He's been suing them for wrongful death and all this stuff. And a lot of the stuff that we know about Oklahoma City in court documents and affidavits and freedom of FOIA requests has come from Jesse Trentadue, this lawyer, going after the feds. And one of the things that he discovered was an operation called PATCOM, or the Patriot Conspiracy. And this was an official federal program to infiltrate and discredit militias. So you have paid informants who join militias, and then they get them to incriminate themselves, and then they make a big deal about it. So the last time, this has happened a couple times, but there was one in maybe 2008, 2009 with the Hutari militia. So the Hutari militia was in Indiana, and I remember hearing about this because it came out in the news that this Hutari militia was going to go, and they were going to kill 80 they were going to kill 88 people, because 88 is the number 8 and the number 8, which corresponds to the letter HH, so HH, Hail Hitler. They were going to kill 88 people and then assassinate the president. I think this was when Obama had just gotten into office, and that was their plan. And fortunately, one of the members of this was in the original bust. Fortunately, one of the members of the group was an informant, and he tipped the ATF off, and they came and they arrested these guys before they killed 88 people and assassinated the president. And I remember thinking when I read this story, I was like, I'll dollars to donuts, that informant was the one who came up with the plan. The other people were just in the meeting, and sure enough, it went to trial, and they all got acquitted, because that's exactly what happened. And so PatCon is all about that. But the main thing with the PatCon is to get everybody to become second-guessing. No one wants to join a militia now because they think that they're going to get framed by the feds and that half the people who work there are feds, which I think was the main purpose of the program. Holy cow. Jonathan Brandeis is the guy who played Lucas in the show Sequest. Okay, was he the young guy, but he committed suicide, right? Oh, yeah. He was also in a kung fu movie with Chuck Norris. I remember just watching that when I was a kid. No, I highly doubt that's true. Didn't the FBI say that John Doe number 2 was mistaken for a guy named Todd Bundy? We don't know that. Um, the loony conspiracy theories tend to be fairly obvious. Aliens, reptilians, flat Earth, etc. I tried to rewatch Sequest. It did not age well. The Clintons, Dick Morris is a moderate Republican now. He said that Janet Reno kept her job after Waco by keeping it a secret. Oh, that's interesting. Well, more reason to hate Hillary. I mean, Hillary Clinton, once she was Secretary of State, uh, got us into a war with Libya just so she could pad her resume. I mean, that's it. She convinced Obama to go along with it. Obama said that our involvement, his agreeing to the war in Libya was 51-49, and it's entirely obvious that she wanted to orchestrate that war, totally wag the doll situation, so she could say, "Look, I'm tough, I'm whatever." And again, thousands of people died. They have slavery in Libya now, like literally chattel slavery, like literal chattel slavery. Not to mention everything that happened in the war itself. And she didn't even run on that. Like, it was such a disaster she didn't run on. But this is the type of people. They will murder thousands for their resume. And what's really sick is that people love her. I'm with her. I'm with her. I'm a progressive. I'm a progressive liberal in the Beltway, and I care about the poor, and I'm with her, even though she will fucking kill brown people so she can increase her curriculum vitae. Or religious people in Waco. It's so sick. It's so sick. It makes my stomach churn. It makes me want to vomit. It makes me hate, and that they can be so smug and sanctimonious and self-righteous and feel like they're God's gift to the earth and that we all owe them everything and we should be so thankful, and they're so insightful, and they're just the most petty, brutal, bloodthirsty, selfish, short-sighted, conniving, dishonest, deceitful, piece of shit, murdering, rapist. There's nothing you can say that isn't true. That's what's so crazy about it. And popular. Popular. They're popular. We've done a video on the EPA. Most likely I have, but one's not coming to mind. I've heard Hillary Clinton, I've heard Chelsea Clinton is not Bill's daughter. I've heard that as well. I forget who the alleged father is. I know that Mongopoulos supported Trump in 2016. I don't know if he still supports him now. Yeah, I don't know either. By the way, Trotsky was the main guy who killed the anarchists in Russia, the Kronstadt Rebellion. Well, so Trotsky was in charge of the Red Army. In the early revolution, Trotsky was much more important than Stalin. Stalin was a more of an intermediate guy who was kind of, I mean, the name Stalingrad was because he was active in Stalingrad, whereas Trotsky was the head of the Red Army in St. Petersburg and then Moscow. And it was really was uh, um, Lenin was number one and Trotsky was number two. And it was only in the power struggles when Lenin appointed Stalin as his personal secretary, and then Lenin had these series of strokes. Stalin built up a dictatorship through the office of being the general secretary of the party. Right? He wasn't the head of the government. He wasn't the president. He wasn't the minister of defense. He was the secretary of the party. But he was able. And again, Kotkin's book on this is amazing. So anyone who really wants the details on that, I highly recommend Kotkin's book. Stalin, Waiting for Hitler, and Stalin, Preludes to Power are the two volumes that are out so far. Can't wait for the next one. I actually just watched the Death of Stalin, which is a great comedy that's actually pretty historically accurate as well. Uh, Tom O'Neill is about federal influence of Charles Manson and MK Ultra. Happened a couple days ago. I'll definitely check it out. I didn't watch that one, so next time I take a walk, I'll listen. Uh, Have you ever read Jana Davis's OKC book, The Third Terrace? If yes, what did you think about her? No, I haven't. But I listened. Is she the one who thinks that it's Al Qaeda and or that it's Iraqis who did it? Um, I have not read it, but I know that Scott. If it's the one where she's alleging that they're terrorists, Scott Horton talked about that, and I put a link in the description to an interview that Scott Horton did today about Oklahoma City, and they talk about that book, if that's the one I'm thinking of, in some detail. And she's a crazy, like she thinks it's Hamas and Al Qaeda and Iran and Hezbollah and Saddam Hussein, and that they're all in it together. Like that, there's this big Muslim conspiracy, and Terry Nichols went to the Philippines because he actually I think she even said that like Ramzi Youssef is really John Doe number two in disguise and all this stuff. So uh, and Paul Wolfowitz was pushing this too. So there were people who were alleging that like Iraq was behind Oklahoma City. So that's the really dumb conspiracy theory. Seems to have gone on the memory hole, but does anyone remember the two guys arrested at first? One older guy, one younger. I remember a lot of beer was involved. Nope, I don't remember that. The Hootery Militia, that's them. Okay. Hans Hermann Hoppe is a triple HHH. It's a conspiracy. Ah, Yeah, Hail Ham Herman Hoppe. Okay, I am now become fully convinced that really crazy conspiracies that become popular are internationally pushed forward as red herrings. Deep state exists. It does. I mean, it depends how you define that term, but I think that there are meaningful definitions that are accurate descriptions of that. I mean, we have with Trump. Trump has kind of made this more official because you've had people saying, "Thank God for the deep state." You know, oh, the deep state's trying to get rid of the president. That's good. Thank God for the deep state. Who was that? It was the head of the CIA who said that. Uh, Hi, Lengthyounarther. What's the worst thing the FDA has done or is doing? The worst thing the FDA has done or is doing is, well, specifically, or because in general, they're just raising the cost of drugs and lowering the supply. So thousands of people are dying every year who could be saved or treated by treatments that exist but have not been approved by the FDA. And so we're talking about probably tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands per year. Cumulatively in their history, we're talking about millions of people. So that's probably the worst thing. The next worst thing is they probably changed the food industry in such a way that it's now much more centralized, much more corporate, and much less local. So a lot of like local businesses, local butchers, local stuff cannot meet the regulations as readily. There's also really crazy things like you can have a license to sell food to like restaurants. So there's companies that make eggs that they sell to McDonald's, but by doing that, they then cannot sell their eggs to individuals. And so then there's this huge discontinuity. So when I made that video about milk, that was part of the problem. They can't just clear the market and say, okay, there's a pandemic. We're not selling as much milk to schools and restaurants. So let's just sell the milk, to the supermarket, and we'll have to obviously lower the price to clear the market, which would be great for everybody who wants to buy milk because we could be buying milk for 30 cents a gallon or whatever, but we can't do that because of the FDA. And each one of those is bad enough, but you put them all together, the cumulative effect is actually tremendous. What if Biden had ran in the 2016 primaries? Do you think he would have beaten Hillary? If yes, do you think he would have beaten Trump? Why or why not? So in the book Shattered about the Hillary Clinton campaign, they do say that Hillary's biggest fear was a Biden run, that Hillary thought Biden would have been her biggest competition. And I'm kind of curious why he didn't, since he obviously wanted to be president. Maybe he was just afraid of her and he didn't think he could beat her. Um, I think that she still would have won the primary against him, but it is true that apparently she thought that he was his biggest opposition. Yes, that's Jana Davis. So Jana Davis is crazy, and I don't think that you should take her too seriously. Another Zionist. I don't know that she's a Zionist, but that all sounds kind of Zionisty to me. Uh, Please take off your shirt for a sexy boy. So Dread Pryor, Alex, I'm still, like I said, I got hypnotized for like 3 hours today before I did this podcast, and it does work. And I am in a suggestible state, but I don't know if I'm in that much of a suggestible state that I'm just going to do that because he said I'm with her. And I just, do you believe in intellectual property laws, for example, drug patents? I do not. I do not believe intellectual property is property, and I think the utilitarian arguments that you could not produce things without it are false because we have examples of places that don't have intellectual property and they're still innovative. So I think that there are certainly some advantages, but the costs far, far outweigh them. And I also just don't believe in the idea of intellectual property. Right? I don't think that's a form of property. And the arguments against that, Stephen Kinsella who's probably the biggest libertarian who's ever seen my channel, right? I know he's watched me before and he's contacted me a few times. He wrote a very influential essay on this topic, probably now this 15 or 20 years ago, against intellectual property, and I found it very compelling, and I think so did most other libertarians for that matter. Um, can you do a video on the schism between the Free State New Hampshire and the Free State Wyoming? Well, I've talked about it before. I wouldn't want to do that because I'm a huge fan of William Royce, the guy who's in charge, the leader, so called. He would not like that term, but the guy who inspired Free State Wyoming. I love Wyoming. I love William C. Royce. Everybody should read his books, especially Boston Tea Party, Molon Labe. The Hologram of Liberty is probably the best critique of the Constitution I've ever read. So he's a fantastic author, and he's a very readable author. And if you want to learn about guns and get into guns, his Boston Guns Bible is the best book for that. So I don't think that there should be any bad blood between the New Hampshire and the Wyoming things. We should be allies. The other thing is, like, Free State Wyoming is like 100 people. Free State New Hampshire is 4 or 5,000 people who have moved, and 15, 20,000 more who have signed up to move. So like they're not comparable in terms of what they've gotten done and what they're working towards. So no, I probably won't make a video about that, just because there's no reason to cause acrimony there. I have mad respect for that guy and for the state, though. Is there anything to be done against evil agencies like the CIA, FBI, ATF, IRS, EPA, or is it better to start a family and try to ignore all this? So yeah, you get very low returns if you lead a crusade. It's better to do what you can. You get better returns on yourself and just being somebody who people respect and who will listen to. And I feel like you'll be more satisfied that way. And in the long run, you might do better off. If there was a way, I would advocate it, but I don't know of a good way to do it. So FDA blocked home COVID tests. Yeah, they blocked tests for 6 weeks. So like if we have, I mean, that's one of the worst things you could possibly do, but they've done that times 1,000. They blocked AIDS treatment, they blocked cancer treatment, they block all kinds of drug treatment. They're blocking, they blocked they blocked marijuana, they've blocked hallucinogens, they've blocked all kinds that, like, our medical research and technology and markets are set back decades because of them, and the prices are increased, many fold. How many female friends have you had throughout your life? You said you don't have much care for their company in general. What made you like the woman that you were friends with? So I had a girlfriend in high school for 1 year, and that started as a friendship and became like we dated, but we didn't do anything, thankfully. Then that became a friendship, and we just would talk and hang out and play board games and go to movies and stuff like that. I'd hang out with her family. I'm friends with her family still. And then in college, I was friends with another girl who was the oldest of 9 children. She spoke French. Her brothers were all super hot. And again, we would hang out, we would talk, we would go to dinner. I'd go to her place, she'd come to mine. I took her shooting once, but we were just friends. It didn't go past that, nor did I want it to. Um, I think Biden didn't want to run in Texas because he was distraught over the death of his son, Beau. Possible. Also, I don't think he wanted to get in a fight with Hillary. I think he thought he would have lost, and I think he probably was right about that. But you could be right about Beau. Um, uh, I just came in. You were hypnotized. What? Yeah. So I got. I was talking to a guy in Grinder about a month ago, and he was really into hypnosis. And I was like, "Does that even work?" I'm obviously you see it on TV, and it sounds like it's you just can't tell. Is this credible? Like, are these actors? Is this, what's going on here? You don't know what's going on in someone's head, so you don't know if it works or not. And he was really into it, and he said that he'd been hypnotized many times. And I said, well, I'm kind of interested. I'll give it a shot. So I had a 3-way Skype call with this guy that I was talking to, and someone that he identified as a really good hypnotist. So we had a 3-way Skype call, and it 100% works. I got 100% hypnotized. It was a crazy experience. I've never felt anything like that before or since. It was really enjoyable. I couldn't Like I was so excited I couldn't like type. I had my phone and I was like shaking. Um, and the guy is very, very, very good. He's very good at suggestion, and there is a. It's weird. So there's subliminal messaging where you put in suggestive wordage, and you may or may not pick it up. But there gets to be this point where you enter into a zone of hyper suggestibility, where anything he says or types, and he can even do it just through text. I mean, he did it to me today just through text, and it's really fascinating. He doesn't know why it works or how it works exactly. There's obviously limits. Like it's not going to work against somebody who doesn't want it to work. Like somebody who's like, I'm absolutely gonna, everything you tell me to do, I'm not going to do it. That kind of person is not going to really work for. So it's not like something where you could take somebody and make them do something completely against their will, or at least that would be very difficult. Um, Although maybe with drugs and stuff, so maybe that's what all the MK Ultra stuff is about. Um, but there's definitely something to it. Like it definitely has a strong physiological effect, and it gets kind of kinky. So I don't know how deep I want to go into describing it, but it definitely works. Did you go to a professional hypnotist or self hypnotist? Just answer that. Fuck McVeigh. Yeah, I think. Look, none of this is to say McVeigh isn't guilty of sin. McVeigh deserved to die, but really he should have been interrogated until he gave up the goods on everybody else who was involved. Uh, Good evening, Pentazoid. Aren't libertarians Freemasons? Some of them are. Most of them aren't. Could Liberland become a libertarian utopia, or is it too small? I think it's too small. It could become something, but it won't become a utopia. Was it like the hypnotism in Office Space? I haven't seen Office Space. Wait, the movie? I don't remember what it was like in that, so I can't say. What's the name of the of this regulation that prevents milk from being sold on the open market? I don't remember the name, but basically there's a different license. You have to have a like a lot of the laws are if you produce stuff yourself, you don't need a license. So if you have your own chickens, if you have your own cow, if you have your own, garden, you don't need a license to eat that. And you also don't need a license to give it away. You do need a license if you sell it. And then who you're selling it to matters. So if you're selling it to, and there's also exceptions, like if you only sell once, or if a small enough proportion of your income comes from that, you don't have to do it. So like same thing with guns. If you sell one gun a year and that's not the main source of your income, you don't need a license to do it. But if you're making a certain percentage of your income, then you do technically. And if you have a facility that's geared towards supplying like restaurants or grocery stores, then you need a separate license if you're going to sell to individuals. That's just how it is. Mm, how late am I? You are 1 hour and 43 minutes late. Those large negative reactions to these conservatives protesting shows and again, this goes back to Oklahoma City. If you're out there, if you're a Tea Party member, militia, right wing, anti-government, own guns, you're a Nazi. The people protesting the Corona lockdown should stop flying the Gadsden flag. Making this look like a libertarian political stand will make people oppose it. Make it look like working class revolt. Yeah, I don't know. Uh, somebody needs to look. There's a balancing act here, and I think that it's fair if people want to go and protest. People have the right to protest the government. The idea that the government can just declare there's an emergency and now the First Amendment's gone and you can't assemble and you can't speak and you can't do all this stuff. That there's a very, very high price that has to be paid for that. So I am supportive of these events going on, and that's in full awareness of the potential dangers of the coronavirus. But we can't allow governors or the president to abuse their power. And for all the liberals out there, I would just ask, what if come November, coronavirus is still a thing. The hospitals aren't full and we're dealing with it pretty well, but people are still getting it and people are still dying. And what if Trump just came out and said, the election's canceled because of coronavirus, so there'll be no election. I'll continue to be president until further notice, Oh, and by the way, you can't protest. What do you think the liberals are going to do? Are they going to say, yeah, you're right? Because if they're bitching right now because people are complaining about the governors, how are they going to, what leg do they have to stand on against that? Because it's not the governor, it's the president then. So I think that this is necessary, and I'm not going to worry too much. The optics are the left is always going to say we're racist. They're always going to say we're Nazis. They don't care whether we have a Gaston flag, an American flag, a Confederate flag, a no flag, a gun or no gun, a MAGA hat or no MAGA hat. Whether we're white, black, woman, trans, it doesn't matter. We're always going to be racists in their mind. They're going to smear everything as racist bigotry. I see people making comments like, I don't get it. Republicans are just meanies. Actually saw this. Whatever Republicans just want to do what's mean. We're just trying to save people, and they just want to be mean and kill people, and that's just their. That person is an NPC. They can't think. They can't empathize. They have no idea why somebody could even possibly oppose what's going on, right? And I'm not. I don't think that we should waste our time trying to pander to somebody who's that far gone ideologically. Uh, I'm sorry, but did you answer my question whether you would think Biden would have beaten Trump? I didn't answer that question. I don't remember you asking it. I think I think Biden would have lost to Trump. Let's see. Looks like Trump administration it plays a blame for the whole crisis on China. Yeah, well, they're definitely they don't want to take any blame, so they're pretending that they're completely at fault and that they're just awesome. Uh, yeah, it's China's fault. We're helpless. It's a good scapegoat, but it's got a big grain of truth too. Go on to bed, have fun. Thanks, Zerapax. Have a good night. Can't believe so many libertarians are upset protesting the state. They only get upset now that they can't go to Walmart all the time. To be fair, broke microphone. People have been protesting for a long time, so we've had lots of protests. It wasn't just this. Uh, I hate to generalize all leftists, but a lot of them are authoritarian apologists. A lot of them are. Uh, I actually think Biden would have beaten Trump. Clinton was disliked, hated to an incredible high level. That's true, but there was also a really strong anti-establishment vibe going on, and Biden was very, very establishment. And I also don't think that he had the enthusiasm that she did. So she was very polarizing. A lot of people hated her, but a lot of people loved her as well. And I don't know how many people loved Joe Biden. And it would have been interesting the opposition research that would have gone into him. It's hard. It's hard for a vice president after 8 years of a president. It's not typically easy. It's very hard for the party that's had it for 8 years to retain it, which I think Biden knows. And it's also so we don't know, but you know, what Trump did wrong was not deregulate sooner. 100% agree. And he's had kind of a deregulatory rhetoric, but he didn't really do anything, didn't do enough with it. I don't think it's a principled deregulator in a way that I would want to be. So it wasn't like first thing he's going to deregulate the FDA, which he should have done. And so, but I don't know if I can blame him that much for being behind the curve there. People generally liked Biden before they lost his mind. They still support him, even though he did lose his mind. Did you go to the New Hampshire protests? I did not. I didn't even know about them until after the fact. Another thing that would have hurt Biden in 2016 is that he's openly pro TPP back then, and that would have hurt him against Trump and the Rust Belt. I mean, Biden's a funny animal. He's pro segregation, against busing, pro the crime bill, throwing blacks in jail, anti-gun but pro-gun, pro-free trade, pro-Iraq war, pro-Afghanistan war, pro-Patriot Act. Like the dude is like he is like the worst of both in every way, just like Hillary Clinton. I'm a total pragmatist about how to go about protesting the lockdown. The precedent of people get the flu, total shutdown, first, second, fourth, fifth amendments is a very bad one indeed. It is a very bad one indeed. Uh, the golf pro in my community played a round of golf with Trump on his course. Trump cheated like a motherfucker, as if we needed insider info to learn that. Ha! Trump owed him 10K. Yeah, he sounds like he's a shyster in a lot of ways. Uh, Biden is from Pennsylvania. He's from Delaware. Biden's from Delaware. That's where he's been senator for like 50 years. He may have been born in Pennsylvania, but his political career is in Delaware. Uh, Biden's from Pennsylvania. I think he would have won that and one or both Michigan and Wisconsin. Well, Michigan and Wisconsin were both very close, and it is definitely true that when Hillary Clinton visited Michigan specifically, and I think also Wisconsin, that her numbers went down in those states. That's according to Shattered, the people who followed her campaign. So it wasn't an oversight that she stopped going to those states. She stopped going to those states because their own internal polling showed that she did worse when she went there. Um, and so would that have happened to Biden? I don't know. I also heard that Trump is the biggest cheater at golf. He's probably got a small penis too. He does. He just seems to have like that. That that short man He's not short, but like he just has this compensatory view of things. One thing I found odd about Biden is that he voted against the Gulf War in 1991, but he voted for the Iraq War in 2002. Do you have any idea how he voted differently? Yeah, so if you listen to the likes of Jimmy Dore, who is a repulsive communist in so many ways, but is not necessarily a bad historian of this period because he was alive during this, he talks a lot about how Bill Clinton, especially, looked at the 1980s and how Ronald Reagan just crushed the Democrats like horribly. And Bill Clinton's response was, we need to swing to the center or swing right. We need to become more free market, more anti-welfare. And we see this with Clinton. Got into this free market bandwagon as far as NAFTA can be considered free market. He said the era of big government is over, things like that. And that so Democrats should become more moderate and become less of these New Deal Democrat types. And so there was like a revolution in the Democratic Party, and they shifted to the center or to the right on a lot of issues, and they did, and that Biden is probably part of that. Biden went along for the right. Obviously, I think Clinton's older than Biden, but they are kind of the similar generation, and that Biden has always been this kind of politician. He doesn't have principles. It's which way is the wind blowing? Where's the future? And so he has done this, and that was the future, I guess. So in 1991, he was more maybe of an old left type, and by 2000, and the other thing too is like the Iraq War is after 9/11, so they all kind of feel like they have to do it. Whereas the Gulf War, I think it was easier to oppose the Gulf War. You would have been accused of anti-Semitism, oddly enough. That's what happened to Joe Sobran. Joe Sobran criticized the first Gulf War and was accused of being an anti-Semite because he didn't want to liberate Kuwait from the Baathists. But there you have it. So that would be my guess is that I mean Biden doesn't have any political philosophy or principles that he really adheres to. He's very much a windsock or a wind vane, just like the Clintons are. So Trump is the one billionaire that people suspect has less money than more. Yeah. There's an unsubstantiated report that as a teenager he hanged a small neighborhood boy out of a school story after a second story window by his ankles just to hear him scream. Who are we talking about? Biden, Trump, or Clinton? Um, oh, that is probably the reason that Trump was sent to military boot camp. That could be. I have no idea. Will Pete Buttigieg be back? He seems to be a national candidate in 2024. The McKenzie-built Frankenstein candidate, groomed and trained like a show dog, eloquent, charismatic, etc. So McKinsey. I actually have a uncircumcised Jewish friend who worked for McKinsey for many years, and that was interesting. He was very highly educated, but had no like he was very highly educated in the classics. So he spoke Latin and Greek and Syriac and a couple other languages, and then he had no job, so he got a job at McKinsey, and they work your ass off. So I actually like to talk to him more about his experiences there because he doesn't work there any longer. Um, I think that what's probably going to happen with Pete, he's obviously ambitious. They're going to do a ton of thinking, and how are they basically going to get black people to stop being homophobic is basically what he needs. That seems to be the problem. But I agree, he definitely has a future. He's angling for it. He's not just going to be the mayor from South Bend anymore. He's going to get some kind of position that's higher, that has more prominence. If Biden wins, probably in the Biden administration somewhere. In a movie about OKC, who would you cast as McVeigh and Nichols? It's a good question. McVeigh. Who's the guy who is in the Elton John movie and the Kingsman movies? Edgerton, maybe him. There's also evidence that McVeigh was gay. There was a guy who he apparently there was a gay guy that McVeigh hooked up with a couple times, and McVeigh was suck his dick. And this guy got he took the FBI took his statement like 4 times, and it's the only recorded sexual encounter that we have of McVeigh. There's no evidence that he hooked up with any women, that he had any girlfriends, that he had any affairs, but he was sucking the dick of this gay dude in Vegas. You know, the money that targeted large co-ops in the CARE Act gets routed back to the Federal Reserve loans to them. Those loans can be even larger than the whole CARE Act. Yeah, it's called fractional reserve banking. Trump. Have you seen Evangelion? No. A lot of black people didn't like him because of his response to police brutality issues in inner city mayor. Yeah, but if that's true, why do they like Biden? Because Biden is really bad on that too. In fact, Biden as a national figure has probably done way more damage than has Pete. So I feel like that is very selective outrage. That's possible because the whole point of the media is to generate selective outrage. But yeah, it's like, well, it's not like Biden is Mr. And of course, Biden also talks about having swimming with black children and having them pet his leg hairs in the pool, and how erect his leg hairs gets. And there was a graph where he said black people can be smart too, or something like that. So, uh, and also Biden is against or pro segregation. So, fuck, dude, like he's just like the governor of Northam. He's like one step away from blackface, which is way worse than you can say about Pete. And again, I'm not saying that as a Pete fan. Black people did put flamboyant gay preachers on a pedestal. Big Daddy Grace, drag queens. I think a lot of black people support Biden because of his association with Obama. That's probably true. That's a big part of it. Uh oh. Uh oh. Let's see, how long is it? So it's going to be 2 hours and 1 minute. So final questions, everyone. When is the next podcast? Oh, yeah, I should probably do that soon. Any ideas for what it should be about? Hug Sinker, thanks. What did you think of the Tiger King? I like the Tiger King. I like the thing that struck me most, without getting into the juicy stuff about whether Carol Baskin killed her husband, which she does seem really creepy, so it wouldn't surprise me. But the main thing is the hypocrisy there of regulations. Here's a woman who keeps tigers in cages, keeps cats in cages, sells tickets for a profit. She has volunteers work for free, so basically what liberals would call slave labor as volunteers. And then she's going to the government to try and regulate out, zoos that keep tigers in cages and don't pay their workers enough. So her hypocrisy there and her attempts at regulatory capture is just infuriating to me. And I think that's the main story. That's you don't have to wonder if she killed her husband or not to know that she's a fucking hypocrite and she's manipulative and she's a rent-seeking bitch, because that's exactly what she is. And she is a hypocrite. The fact that she has people who, and more power to her that she is getting all this free labor from her good PR and the fact that she does it's a internship or whatever, and she gets people who want to do it because it's a philanthropy for them. Good for her. But then you can't criticize Joe Exotic because he doesn't pay his people enough. You can't criticize Joe Exotic because he keeps his animals in cages when she keeps her animals in cages. She also clearly bought and sold tigers and weaned them for petting and bred them for petting and all that stuff. So uh, I think that there were a lot of interesting libertarian themes in there. Also, apparently, the guy who ran Joe Exotic's campaign is a gay libertarian. Uh, what do you think? Do you think there would be mandatory vaccines because of this outbreak? No. Pardon Joe Exotic. Yeah. If he tried to get her executed, I don't think that he should be pardoned. Tear into the hypocrisy between Clinton and Kavanaugh. I love the righteous anger. Jared, you like all my videos where I get angry. Like, I know you fist bump whenever I get pissed. I mean, what else is there to say? I mean, Bill Clinton is obviously a rapist. He's obviously a murderer. He's a drug dealer. He does drugs. He lies to his wife. Well, I don't know if he lies to Hillary. It's a very good chance Hillary knows everything, and they just have a power marriage and they don't care. He lies about his religion. He lies about his political philosophy. He hates like he will pander to gays, and then he will fuck gays. Like, look, and I don't, the gay marriage thing, I don't give a shit about. I don't think the government should be involved in marriage or whatever. But among the gay community, gay marriage is the thing. And he completely opposed that his entire presidency, while at the same time pretending like he's the best friend of gay people ever. And like the degree of deceitful pandering, I mean, you can tell FDR was his favorite president. You can absolutely see the level of deceit, but he was much better at it. Mostly because he could walk. Uh, um, and he can mesmerize people. It's very Sauron-esque, actually. If you look at Sauron, who can take on the appearance of Anatar, the gift giver, and seem like he's this great guy, and everybody can, wow, he's amazing, and the devotion that he inspires in people, and that the shameless way he takes advantage of that and manipulates that and uses that for the most shameless political ends, and like, again, that he will kill children, just to save the headlines, that he will gloat about how the deaths of hundreds helped his campaign. And then he'll go and he'll shed a crocodile. He'll cry, and all the cameras will go. I remember when the tears came, and you hear all the cameras clicking, and it's like going to be front page. Oh, he cares about the children of Oklahoma City, and how many people knew better. And we're like, fuck you. Fuck you for the children of Waco, and the children of Iraq, and the children of Kabul and Khartoum, and all over Africa, and in Somalia. Don't forget all that shit that happened in Somalia, too. And in Kosovo. Oh, yeah. That was, Hitchens brings this up, too. There's so much history that was small history that we don't remember now. But like, when Kosovo happened, and the prime minister of Italy went to Clinton and said, "Okay, what's our plan?" And Clinton's like, "We're going to bomb Slobodan Milosevic until he stops, attacking the Kosovo." And prime minister says, well, what if you bomb him and he doesn't stop attacking the Kosovars? And Clinton's like, I guess we'll just bomb him even more. Well, that's what happened. He didn't stop, and he ended up expelling all the Albanians from Kosovo. And there was this huge refugee crisis that they weren't prepared for. And as Hitchens points out, he goes, if you knew that was going to happen and you did it anyway, then you're complicit. You're an accessory before the fact. Like that, but those type of calculations just did not matter. The suffering that he inflicted on other people did not matter. It did not figure into the calculations. The only thing that figured in the calculations is, how does this look? How will I look on the 6 o'clock news? What will the polls say? They were very famous about this, following the polls. And so he can get up there and rape the brains out of somebody, and then get up and say, I love my wife and I would never lie, and just the petty, deceitful, bloodthirst. It's just, there's no limit. And then to get out there and to be adored and to have everyone fawn over you, and oh, he plays the saxophone, he's so cool, as he rapes your daughter and kills your child. Like, fuck, what a piece of fucking shit. At least with somebody like Bush, you could say he kind of believes it, maybe. Which, I don't know, maybe we can be cynical about the Bushes for sure, but like, it seems like he's just a kind of a little dopey guy who believes in that stuff. Where Clinton is completely, me, what's good for me, and then to act all altruistic, like he cares about you, he'll do whatever you want, and he will stab you in the back every time. It's just, it's I just know what to like. And what's also horrible about it is, like I said, I've never met him, but having watched him, I feel like if I did meet him, like he could probably cast a spell on me and be like so charming that it'd be like, he's, I can kind of see, he has this folksy. You wouldn't know he was a Rhodes Scholar. Oh, and this was Hitchens brings this up too. When he was at Oxford, he went to Oxford at the same time Clinton did. Now, they didn't know each other, but he said that, along with Robert Reich, by the way, Robert Reich also went to Oxford at the same time, and Hitchens did know Reich. But he said there were a lot of Americans who were Vietnam conscientious objectors. They were against the Vietnam War, and they didn't want to partake in the Vietnam War, and good for them. And so they went to Oxford. And Hitchens says they were heroes, and I appreciated them. But he said Clinton was a draft dodger, a different thing. So what Clinton was is somebody who doesn't want to be in the draft. He doesn't want to go to Vietnam, but it wasn't because he had moral scruples about the war. In fact, he wanted to be able to claim that, no, I'm patriotic and whatever. I just, couldn't, I had other commitments. So this very snide, pathetic, cowardly double standard of, oh, no, I'm patriotic, and I didn't, and I support the troops and I support the war, but he didn't really want to fight in it. So, that's classic Bush, Cheney, or what was it when Ron Paul got in an argument with Newt Gingrich? Newt Gingrich is like, well, Vietnam, and I had a family, and I didn't have. And Ron Paul was like, I had a family, and I got the draft card, and I went. Where were you? So you just, every time you see him on the TV, you have to remind yourself he killed children. And I don't think it's sadistic. I don't think he takes pleasure in it. I think he just doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't care. They don't matter. If it looks good for him, if it's good for his politics, he will do it. It doesn't matter how many he kills. The only calculation is if it's so bad that there'll be a backlash. But he also, because his charm is so good, and because he has so many people who will be his bitch, he knows that he can get away with a lot, because at the end of the day, CNN's going to believe him. And your Democrat grandma is going to believe him. And there's going to be this trendy Georgetown educated lawyer who thinks he's good for gay rights, even though he didn't do shit for. He did Don't Ask, Don't Tell was his idea. It's the kind of guy who can fuck you and get you to say thank you afterwards. Can you make it about Bernie Sanders' economic plan? Who cares? He's out. Mandatory vaccine question is a very good question. It is a good question. It's not clear whether they'll even have a vaccine, though. And the idea that you need a test to re-enter society should be opposed. The Nobel Prize winning French doctor who discovered HIV recently went on a podcast and claims that he thinks COVID-19 must have been fabricated in a lab. I don't know about fabricated in a lab. I think there's a good chance it grew in a lab. We know that there was a lab right by where this supposedly started, and they were doing research on COVID-19 and on bat to human transmission, and they were calling for experts to come and study it. So they were obviously researching it there, and it doesn't seem beyond the realm of possibility that it started there. But if the Chinese invented it, I don't think that they would release it onto their own people first on purpose. Uh, he says that COVID contains sequences of HIV, and COVID may have been designed as a trial HIV vaccine. That sounds very similar to the whole up the river conspiracy theory that HIV was a polio vaccine. You know, that they were doing polio vaccine tests on chimpanzees in the Belgian Congo, and that is how HIV was corrected. And there's a book on that called Up the River. Um, I don't know. I'll check out if you can find a link to the if you can send me a link to the podcast, I'd love to listen to that. Um, yeah, Bill Clinton signed up the DOMA and DAT into law during his presidency, and yet they will say that he is a pro-gay, you know, the best gay president ever. Like that's just delusional. Hey, Length, are you pro-vax? Vaccine should be an option, but I don't consider myself pro-vax in that sense. Are you suggesting that Bob Dole would have won the? I don't know about that, but Clinton said that it saved his presidency. So that was Clinton's assessment. You can read that. I forget which book that is, but he gave an interview on Air Force One to a lot of the press where he basically said that. He's charismatic. That he is. And my Serb friends say that they love Trump because he's an enemy of the Clintons. Well, you know, Milosevic was actually a war criminal. Like the war in Serbia was not justified from the American point of view, but that's not to say there wasn't actual ethnic cleansing going on. It was exaggerated in our media, and they were calling him the next Hitler, and they got involved in a way that was irresponsible and whatever. But that's not to justify Milosevic. Just like you wouldn't want to justify Saddam Hussein just because we waged a war crime against him. Robert Reich is such an economic illiterate. Well, he's a lawyer. He's not an economist. He's a lawyer who thinks he knows about economics. Do you know the real history of the Bush family? What? That they're from Maine, that the Skull and Bones, that their father was a Nazi, the Prescott Bush was a Nazi who was selling secrets to the Nazis, that they're from, I don't know, that there's so much about the Bushes that I don't know, that they killed JFK, that's the other conspiracy theory. Interestingly, my friend thinks it would have been a total slaughter had the Western powers not intervened. I don't know, maybe. Fox News said Trump asked Trump about the virus escaping from a facility in Wuhan. Trump wouldn't answer the question and said they were looking into it. I think it is probably true. I think it might be true. I hope, I mean, I wish it never happened, but I hope it's true and that they can pin it on the communists and the communists lose the mandate of heaven. If that happens, that would be worth everyone who died, to be honest. But I don't know that that will happen. I thought DOMA was supposed to be an upgrade to what was happening to the gays in the military. My understanding was that the military was outing gays and removing them. Yeah, that's basically true. So they had a policy where an anti-sodomy policy. You weren't allowed to be a gay in the military. So what Don't Ask, Don't Tell was kind of a compromise. You could be gay if you didn't talk about it. So it was actually an improvement. If you're talking about gays being able to the military is an improvement. But it wasn't seen that way. The gay community hated it. By the time I came of age, it was considered a bad thing. Robert Wright calls himself an economist. Well, to be fair, you don't need a license to be an economist. So you can call yourself one. Uh, Stefan Molyneux calls himself a philosopher. So, we can call ourselves whatever we want. I think intactivists need to disassociate themselves with anti-vaxxers. There is so much science on the ones on our side as intactivists. It's simply not on the side of the anti-vax people, and it makes us look bad. Well, Arthur, I would actually go further, and I think that when you have movements that are single issue movements, as the intactivist movement really is, that you should not align it with any other position. So as an intactivist, you can certainly have your opinions on vaccine and abortion and taxes and whatever, but as an intactivist, that should be the only thing you should talk about. So if you are in an intactivist meeting and people start talking about vaccines, just say, listen, that's not what we're here for. We can agree to disagree on all of that. It doesn't matter. We can debate each other in a different venue. We're here to do intactivism. We're here to end circumcision. That's what we should care about. And this came up with the abolition movement, because the abolition movement, the people in the abolition movement disagreed on a great many topics. Some of them were pacifist, some of them weren't. Some of them were communist, some of them weren't. Some of them were, Anabaptist, some of them weren't. Some of them were more evangelical than others. Some were atheists. Well, I don't know if that was true, but they ran the whole spectrum, and you could very easily have an anti-slavery meeting devolve into a debate about a whole bunch of other topics. And so someone like Garrison, and he wasn't the only one, but was very good at saying, look, I have strong opinions about a lot of topics, and I do as well. As I just compare myself to William Lloyd Garrison, so sorry. But on this, in the American Anti-Slavery Society, we are talking about anti-slavery. That's all we're going to talk about. We're not going to debate any other issues. We can debate them in other places and other times. So the Liberator didn't run articles about pacifism. It didn't run articles about taxation or the gold standard or the Second Bank of the United States or anything like that. It only talked about slavery, and intactivists should only talk about circumcision and intactivism. And that's it. I even think it's going a little too far for intactivists to talk about foreskin restoration, because it's just, is it a related topic? Yes. But it's not the same thing, and the focus should be, it's a single focus issue, and that's how it should stay. It shouldn't be about vaccines. It shouldn't be about abortions. It shouldn't be about a woman's right to her body or lack thereof, or vaccines, or anything else. It should be about ending circumcision. That's it. It gives it a clear focus. Then you're not debating about everything else, and that's the only way to go about it, as far as I'm concerned. Francis Collins, the NIH guy, also said it might have come from Chinese lab. He said he had been in Chinese labs. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a guy I've been watching on YouTube since I think December, who lived in China for 10 years, and he's not an expert on diseases or anything, but he was saying on their web, he speaks Chinese fluently, and he was going to their websites for those labs, and they were taking out ads looking for people with doctorates in coronavirus and bat to human spread. And this is, last fall, before it spread, before it broke out. So they were clearly doing research on it. And the fact that they were doing research on a lab at the epicenter of where it happened. And then the other thing is, like, well, they said it started from these wet markets, but they haven't closed the wet markets. And it's like, well, if this came from a wet market, wouldn't you want to close the wet markets? And maybe they're not closing them because they know that's not where it started. And the fact that they did all these gag orders, that they were destroying. I mean, we know that they destroyed notes, that they were arresting whistleblowers, that they were disappearing. There's a lot of these researchers disappeared. They're obviously covering something up, and it could be because they're culpable. I don't think there's an English translation. If only I knew somebody who spoke French, who was educated in France and has a French fiance. Okay. Do you think Richard Wolff makes decent anti-capitalist arguments at all? Not from what I've seen. I've read stuff from him, and I watched his debate with Gene Epstein, and I don't think he makes good arguments at all. I think he's completely delusional. He has no idea what libertarians really think. He doesn't know what capitalists think. He doesn't understand why free markets work or why people like it. He makes it sound like we just have a fetish against the government. Read up about Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben as part of gay American. Yeah, so he was definitely gay. He trained the army, and he had a whole bunch of twinks. He had his adjutants were young boys who were twinks. Von Steuben was definitely gay. Yep. He liked twinks. He liked younger guys. And presumably they were uncut twinks as well. So he had good taste. What can I say? Dude, independent labs broke down the virus. It isn't synthetic. The conspiracy has no merit. Who's Shinker? But that doesn't mean it's synthetic. Okay, you can be doing research. Like you can have a lab where you have animals with diseases that you're doing research on. That doesn't make the disease synthetic, right? So there's people in the hospital right now who have COVID-19 who are getting research done on them, right? They're being researched, and they're researching COVID-19, and that doesn't mean that it's synthetic. So I think that the argument here could very easily just be that they are studying COVID-19 because COVID-19 is a real virus. They're studying it in bats and pangolins, and they're studying it human transmission in a lab, and then it gets out. That doesn't mean that they invented that they created the virus from scratch or that they did any genetic modifications. So I think you're a bit straw manning the argument there. Uh, Tortoise is saying that they did engineer it. I haven't listened to the podcast and I don't speak French, so I wouldn't be able to. But it could definitely come from a lab. But that doesn't mean it was engineered. You know, from what I've seen, he never made an economic statement in debate, and therefore no argument. Sounds about right. It was one of those, Dave Smith kind of framed it really well. Oh, Richard Wolff is one of the most revered, you know, um, communists out there, Marxists out there, and what does he say? He reminds you that he went to Harvard like every other sentence. So he's an elitist on top of all that. But they're just not very like. It feels like the socialists just live in this sauce of straw man arguments and self revelatory echo chambers, and so there's no connection. And I don't think libertarians are as bad. I think libertarians can accurately describe socialism and the appeal of socialism and how it would work in a way that they can never describe libertarians. And I don't know, like I always wonder, like, am I wrong? Do I not get it? And I just think I get it, but I've never been disconfirmed in that. And I've talked to a lot of socialists. Like I know what they're talking about. I understand the appeal and I understand the system they're talking about, which is why I can ask questions that they can't answer. And it's not just me, it's pretty much every libertarian because like the socialist worldview is in the zeitgeist. It's out there. Those arguments are part of our of there's a lot of socialism in our common culture, our mass media. I tried to watch Richard Wolff lecture once to get some perspective. He starts by saying you're getting ripped off. Another pitchfork level rabble rousing. Ramble rousing. Yeah. Well, and we are getting ripped off, but you gotta say why and how. And we're getting ripped off by the government, but how is that capitalism? You debate Richard Wolff on Twitter. That's why I'm not on Twitter. Isn't feminism a Karl Marx value, as in Marxist feminism? That I don't think that Karl Marx was a feminist. Maybe Marxists today are maybe feminists today tend to be Marxist, but not always. But I don't know how much of that's in the original Marx. After 5 more minutes, I just couldn't stand it anymore. How does this guy command so much intellectual respect? It's called preaching to the choir, right? It's the same thing when you watch like a religious person just ramble on about shit that just there's no evidence for, and yet people find it really duh, duh, duh. The funny thing was that he critiqued socialism not being in econ departments and only sociology. Well, make an economic statement. He was the worst debater I've seen in a while. Yeah, and Epstein's a good debater. And Epstein knows his shit when it comes to socialism and Marxism, right? He was raised by a commie. So we can speak their language and they can't speak ours. It's just a total not fair debate. Guy doesn't know economics. He has a framework of how to attack capitalism and always sticks to that model. How did von Steuben get away with being gay in the midst of Puritan America? Well, Greg, I think the late 19th century wasn't really the Puritan America. So the Puritans had lost a lot of their power by then, and actually, this is the age of the Enlightenment, and for instance, a lot of the founding fathers were probably not arch Christians. Some of them were, but there's some of them were deists. If you look at somebody like Thomas Jefferson, he was an avowed deist, or Thomas Paine, the same thing. And that's only explicitly, and like deep down, they may have been atheists. There's a lot of people who think that they were. They may have been. There were a lot of religious people at the time who suspected them of being such, and the same should also be said of Washington. That I mean, these guys were public men, and so they knew they had to be religious in public. But there's a lot to be said. Somebody like Washington, for instance, was a Freemason. Well, the Freemasons had a very progressive, anti-religious ideology, and yet he was a Freemason. So there's obviously something about the way he talked about religion publicly and the way he acted about religion privately that indicates that they were not necessarily fundamentalist, literal Bible thumping Christians. And it's especially pertinent in the case of somebody like Washington because he would have been Steuben's superior. He's the guy who brought Steuben over, and he was training with him. So uh, the homosexuality was more tolerated then than it may have been later. All right, so it's not like homosexuality has been this um, deadly sin that has been punished by death up until the 1990s. It's been persecuted to varying degrees, and yeah, lots of the founders were Freemasons. Absolutely. Just look at Washington, D.C. It was designed by a Freemason. It was clearly designed by a Freemason. So, I mean, that's not even a conspiracy theory. We know that. Who was it? The black French Freemason. I mean, all the monuments are Freemasonic. So, uh, yeah, it just wasn't. You don't want to telescope back and feel like, well, in the last 20 years, it's been getting better for homosexuals. So the farther back you go, it must have gotten worse and worse and worse. That's not entirely correct. A lot of the anti-sodomy laws and the anti-gay laws and all that stuff, the queer baiting, the pink scare, that's really more of a product of the mid 20th century or the early 20th century than previously. What was happening in the 1700s and the 1800s, it appeared. I mean, we're assuming that there were gay people and gay stuff was going on, but there wasn't any official persecution. So we don't know if people were just completely tolerating it or if they were oblivious to the sense that you wouldn't guess, right? Like today, if you have an older man like von Steuben and he's got two teenage assistants who are super hot, who he takes wherever he goes and insists on like having them live with him, you would assume that there's something going on. But in 1780, you may not have thought that. You may have thought, oh well, he's just taking care of them, and they're his wards and whatever. So, or they may have known what was happening and perceived it as being acceptable in some sense. The other thing too, I mean, these guys on top of being Masons were all read Greek and Latin and were versed in that, and they knew their history. And we all know how the Greeks and Romans felt about homosexuality. They hardly didn't like it. And if you can tell, these guys were influenced. Just look at the architecture, right? Look at the terms that they used, right? Everything is Latin, everything's Greek. So it wouldn't have been as hard as I think that you could telescope back. Did you read Thad Russell's papers on drag queens in the black urban communities in the 30s and 40s? I have not read Thad Russell's papers on that. I did just listen to Thad Russell talking about what did I listen to him about? I forget. Thad Russell. Sometimes I really don't like his personality, but he does actually have some really good insights here and there, and he's had some really good interviews. I forget what did I listen to. I'm still into board games. I'm not really into board games. I haven't played any in years. The only one I really enjoy is called Axis and Allies. I said we were going to wrap up, and it's been half an hour, and I have to pee really bad. So, all right, last call for real this time. So, and I'll just wrap up. So it is the 25th anniversary. You know, we should always remember Oklahoma City. We should also all remember the crime that happened And the fact that justice was not done, that many perpetrators escaped, there's absolutely no question about it. And that in all likelihood, those perpetrators include a whole bunch of Nazis, some of whom probably were working for the government, for the ATF and for the FBI, and that the ATF, at least, and probably other agencies in the federal government, likely knew it was going to happen and let it happen, or failed to stop it either way. And hundreds of people died, and they cynically used it to enhance their own popularity. The fact they even tried to pretend to be heroes. And that's who runs us. That's what democracy has given us. That's what the United States is. And you cannot have a theory, you cannot have a political ideology that ignores that reality, where you just pretend away and you imagine a philosopher king. This is what everybody does, is they imagine a benevolent, trustworthy, competent ruler that ultimately has their best interests at heart and has the ability to implement policy along those lines, that they have the knowledge to do that. And there's so much that's wrong with that. They don't have the knowledge even if they wanted it, but they don't have that motivation. They don't care about you. They will kill you or let you die just to advance their career in a heartbeat. At least most of them. Are there exceptions? Sure. There's the Walter Joneses and the Ron Pauls. Like, there are people who wouldn't do that, but those are not the people who rise the highest, who have the most success, who have the most powerful. The Clintons are a dynasty, right? They're still powerful after all of that, after everything that they did, after there was nobody left to lie to, or rape, or murder, and they're still popular. People still love them. People still remember them with affection. And those people who remember them from affection are so blind that they cannot understand why anyone would be angry at them. And there are those people who would hear what I have to say here, and without refuting a single scintilla of what I've said about the Clintons, which, again, not relying on Alex Jones here. This is straight up public record admitted stuff. They would condemn me as having a pathology, that there's something wrong with me. Why am I obsessed with the Clintons? I saw this. If you watch the Clinton, it's actually interesting. Go back and watch Christopher Hitchens interviews about Clinton. Every interview, people are like, don't you think you're obsessed with the Clintons? Don't you think that you're just too obsessed with the Clintons and that you should just get over it? And that why are you like a stalker? Go watch the Charlie Rose interview with Hitchens. And, Hitchens will bring up a point like, Bill Clinton is a rapist. Bill Clinton raped at least 4 women, minimally. And he does not even deny it. He admits it. But he doesn't admit it. He doesn't deny it. And Charlie Rose would be like, why are you so obsessed with Bill Clinton? As if no refutation, no denial, no counterpoint. I'm just going to go right past the point you just made, pretend I didn't hear it, and turn it around, and you're the one who's got a problem. You are the crazy person. You're the paranoid person. You're the one who has some kind of psychopathy because you don't adore this fucking war criminal murderer, rapist, murderer, drug addict, hypocrite, liar, power-hungry, cowardly, draft-dodging piece of shit, racist, drug war fighting, free trade fucking piece of garbage. I don't even know what you could say that wouldn't be true of him. And he's popular. And it's funny, the web that they can, so much of it is projection, because people who, again, like gay guys who who hate Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and who love gay marriage, and who believe all women, and I'm with her, and legalize drugs, and black people are oppressed, and they're like, Bill Clinton's the man. I love Bill Clinton. The fuck is wrong with you? Are you stupid? You went to college. That's your whole problem. And even when they cut it from the left, when Christopher Hitchens or Sam Harris or uh, Andrea Dworkin, right? There were feminists who knew better. There were feminists who knew that he was garbage, that he was evil. Yeah, not inhaling it. What the fuck? People believe that shit. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. Perjury. 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 Oh, and you blew up a hospital. Shamelessly. You went to war for nothing. You know, I will say he didn't get baited by bin Laden. Bin Laden thought he couldn't be baited. I'll give him that. I'll give him that. So, and of all the things, I think Oklahoma City Falls is one of the worst. And and I don't think we don't have evidence that it's a master plot, right? That Clinton was on top and he was pulling the strings of the ATF and the FBI and orchestrating this whole thing so he could look good. I actually don't think that's what happened. We certainly don't have evidence to that effect. What we do have evidence is that these agencies were running their own counterintelligence programs, that they had their own operatives, and they were involved at that level. And uh, it went bad, probably without Clinton's knowledge, but then he took advantage of it. What hospital did he bomb? He bombed the hospital in Khartoum. There's some good videos on the Branch Davidians on Netflix. Everyone go and watch The Rules of Engagement. There's a couple other ones, Waco and New Revelation, and a few others, not as good though. Ron Paul basically thought Clinton was pure evil if you look at the press conference he gave. Yeah, and he said that they're impeaching him for the wrong reasons. He said, I voted to impeach him, but they're doing it for the wrong reasons. He said he's a war criminal because of Iraq, because of the regime change. They made regime change an official policy in 1998. Uh, we could go down the list. The guy should be impeached for so many reasons, and they go after him for lying about a blowjob. Yeah, people called him an apologist. People called him an apologist for Clinton. He's like, I voted to impeach him. So, all right, guys. Anyway, it's the 25th anniversary. People shouldn't forget this. There's been so much history that's happened since then: 9/11, Iraq War, Afghanistan War, the Obama years, the Bush years, the end of the Clinton. There's been so much, but we should never forget things like this. We shouldn't forget Waco. We shouldn't forget Oklahoma City. We shouldn't forget the Gulf of Tonkin. We shouldn't forget the Bay of Pigs. We shouldn't forget Operation Paperclip. We shouldn't forget the secret betrayal. Secret betrayal, what's that? That secret betrayal is when the Allies turned over millions of Russians to Stalin, who he then had killed. Millions of Cossacks, millions of white Russians who had fled. Turned them over to the Soviets after World War II so they could be killed and put into camps. Read that book, The Secret Betrayal, by not Trotsky, War and Peace by Tolstoy. It's Tolstoy's nephew, not the original Tolstoy. Right? We need to remember, we should not forget this. This is the government that we have. This is who is in the government. This is who rules us. It's not a philosopher king. It's not Plato. It's not Aristotle. It's not some incarnate god of democracy who has only your best interests at heart and is totally competent and totally beneficent. Scott Horton says that it's like it sounds like people think that the statue of Lincoln is running the show there. That there's this godlike protector deity called Abraham Lincoln and that he's up there and there's an American flag in the background and he's running the democracy. And no, it's Bill fucking Clinton, a lying, murdering piece of shit liar, draft dodging, killer, rapist, deceitful, perjuring, warmongering buffoon who likes to bite the upper lips, gets red in the face, sweats his ass off, and then lies about having polio when he comes into your pussy. Okay, that's who's in charge. Who he looks at the polls and decides what I'll be popular with, and if he has to kill you, lie to you, rape you, dump you in the thing, get you suicided, have you die, left in a drug deal, fly in, protect the CIA, who's helping the Sandinistas, blah blah blah, or the Contras. He'll do all of that stuff in a heartbeat, and he'll get on TV, and the TV will act like he's a movie star and clap and fawn over him and give him money, and all these super smart people who have big businesses and they'll you're amazing, money, 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 money. So fuck him forever. Every time you see him, think about the people he's killed. Think about the deaths that the blood of the children that have skid that have greased his ascendancy, that he has cynically manipulated, that he has shed his fucking phony ass crocodile tears, gun grabbing, Columbine causing, Brady bill signing, uh, NAFTA fucking perverted corruption of the free market. Dude, the guy is Sauron. Dude, he's Sauron with the ring. It's just so fucking disgusting. So, you should do a video on the Clintons. There's so much that's been done on the Clintons that's correct. There's so many good books. Christopher Hitchens. Anyone who wants to get onto an anti-Clinton riot, just go and type Christopher Hitchens, Bill Clinton. You can spend the next 4 hours watching his stuff. Okay, and there's so many good books. The Clinton Chronicles, Nobody Left to Lie To. Um, there's more that I don't have. I read a whole bunch in college. Clinton didn't cause Columbine. But he did profit from it. Well, so there are actually some pretty juicy Columbine conspiracies as well that I will not get into here. If you want to go onto YouTube, though, type up Columbine cause and watch a very long, very boring, but very detailed analysis of the Columbine killing. Columbine killings, excuse me. Yeah. You were actually paying attention to my rant, everything that I said. Good for you. Anyway, guys, never forget, never surrender, never forget, never forget, you know, um, and tomorrow is the anniversary of Columbine. Yeah. April is just a hell of a month. So anyway, guys, I'm going to call it good at that. Thank you all for watching and have a good night.